Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, good morning and welcome to the meeting of Adult and Community Wellbeing Scrutiny Committee. Before we begin, for those of us in the council, there's no fire drill planned this morning. In the event of the fire alarm sounding, we will need to leave the council chamber through the rear door over there and through reception, assemble at the car park at the front of the building and await further instructions. I'd like to welcome Wendy Bokett, Executive Councillor for Adult Care and Public Health. Councillor Liz Sneath sends her apologies. Councillor Colin Matthews, Executive Support Councillor for NHS Liaison, Community Engagement and Coroners. Glenn Garrard, Executive Director of Adult Care and Community Wellbeing. And Derek Ward, Director of Public Health. Welcome. Any other attendees will announce at the start of each agenda. I'll just make one comment. Having viewed the executive live on the LCC webcast, just please make sure your microphone is relatively near to your mouth because the sound quality is pretty appalling otherwise and you can't hear what people are saying. So, number one, apologies for absence. Emily, please.
Thank you, Chairman. We've not received any apologies, but Councillor Overton has let us know she'll be a little late today. Thank you.
Thank you. Declaration of members' interests. If any members have any declarations during, please just make us aware. 3 minutes of the 1st of December 2021. To confirm the minutes of the meeting on the 1st of December as a correct record, can I have a proposer and a seconder, please? Proposed, Tracy Carter. Seconded, Nicola Clark. All in favour? Excellent, thank you. Announcements by the Chairman, Executive Councillor and Executive Director. Glenn, have you got a quick update for us on the current situation regarding adults NHS?
Thank you, Chair. Is this working okay in terms of, yeah, speaking well? So a number of updates. As you might expect, Christmas and New Year were rather busy times in health and social care. The 2 bank holiday weekends were particular pinch points, notably at Lincoln County Hospital, which continues to be perhaps the most worrying part of the system at the moment. The likelihood today is that Lincoln County will come away from a critical incident, although it will still be under severe pressure. The situation at Boston has improved, and Grantham, which yesterday had lost all its water supply, has now come back online in terms of water facilities. So that's also an improving position. In terms of social care, I think one of the critical issues here is the high level of vaccination rates, which exists in both residential and home care services. That's really good because it provides not only a level of protection, but also means that absences are lower. At the moment, across the whole care workforce, it's about 7.9%. It was 8.1, so it's gradually improving. And I'm rather hoping that, subject to no further issues to deal with, we will start to see a slightly improving picture during the remainder of the month, which is probably the point at which this particular wave starts to recede into February, one hopes. I'm sure Derek would give another update on that if necessary. So, relatively stable. Pressure, a lot of pressure, but compared to many systems that I'm seeing elsewhere in the country, I think we're fairly confident that we will get through this in a reasonable state.
Excellent. It's encouraging news. Thank you. Councillor Lee.
Can I declare a personal and pecuniary interest, please, as I'm an employee of Lincoln County Hospital? I'm not sure if that means I can't speak on this item at all, does it? I would imagine perhaps so.
That should be a standardary
Yeah, can I take advice on?
Standard interest anyway, isn't it?
Yeah. So I can't speak then, no. That's fine, yeah.
Thank you. Derek, did you want to say something? All right, okay, thank you. Wendy?
Yeah, just basically, I'd just like to thank all the staff over Christmas, not only our own staff, but our home care staff, our OTs, social care, and everybody in the NHS that's worked so hard over Christmas to keep us all going. Home care was a little bit dicey over Christmas, but we have come out of it and we are holding our own now, and we are seeing a big improvement, so hopefully over the next few weeks. But it has been difficult and the staff have worked incredibly hard, so I would just like to say my thanks to them all, and that's okay. Thank you.
Thank you, and I think everyone in this committee would also support the hard work of the staff throughout all of the organisations in relation to adult care and public health. It's been quite a phenomenal season, really, to get through. Glenn?
Yes, sorry, Chair. I should also mention that both Derek and I are on a gold call this morning that I'm afraid we're not going to be able to avoid, so we will need to leave committee at just before 11:30.
Yes, no, that's noted, and we have sort of just altered the agenda a couple of times, actually, just to take on board that you'll both be gone, so we'll work our way through it. There is a briefing on the Adult Social Care Reform White Paper, known as People at the Heart of Care. When this formal meeting concludes, we will have a break and then we'll resume on the briefing and updating on the Adult Social Care Reform White Paper. The working group on free sugars. Finally, I'd like to update the committee on the activities of the free sugars working group, which was held on the meeting of 17th of December 2021. We'll be initiating discussions on the possibility of preparing a series of promotional material on raising awareness on the sugar content in common foods. We're going to have a word with the comms team to look at what we can do and how we can do it, and working with our sort of providers and how we can really sort of promote and push this agenda out. Ironically, I was watching the GP comes on Good Morning Britain, if you ever watch that in the morning. I think he's called Araf, I can't remember his full name, but he actually did a sugar. It was an hour-long programme on basically free sugars, and he pushed himself with an abuse of the sugars and how his body went into deterioration, and he got spots and acne, and his whole mental health and everything deteriorated, and then he reformed himself and came back out. And then that programme finished, and then they went on into the whole sort of world of weight and obesity. It was actually quite fascinating, actually, and it was a great piece of work. It was TV coverage, actually. You saw it, obviously, Nick. It was very interesting. So I think there is still more to be gained. We'll perhaps have further discussions with public health on what can be done to sort of really sort of drive it out a bit further. Okay, on that, we will go to the main agenda. And we're going on to 5, which is Adult Care and Community Wellbeing Budget Proposals. So for this, I'd like to welcome Pam Clipson, Head of Finance for Adult Care and Community Wellbeing. So welcome, Pam.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Good morning, all. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Excellent. Apologise, do seem to have been sticky mutes, etc. this morning. So if it's okay, I should take the paper as read and just pick out the key points. Adult care and community wellbeing are forecasting the ability to live within the 2022-2023 budget proposed. This is on the recommendation into Council in February that the 3% adult social care precept that was deferred from the year we're currently in is applied into 22-23, and that recommendation is predominantly made to support the cost move, that we'll come on to in a second. So pages 17 and 18 refer to a combination of our expected publications that we see each year, things like the confirmation of the national living wage, intentions around the public health grant, but you will also see now the introduction of our social care reform agenda. 2022-23 is the first of those years impacted, particularly through the funding that we are bringing in through the Build Back Better, and we'll come on to a bit more of that in a moment. So the key points of the growth in adult social care are contained on page 19. We, as Adult Care, undertook a fair cost of care exercise for residential services in 21-22, both in preparation for the contract that's coming in from the 1st of April 22, but also knowing that the forthcoming reforms would touch on a fair cost for our provider rates. The output of that, plus the increase in national living wage to £9.50 from the 1st of April, is driving our largest cost increase, included in point 2.4 on the bottom of page 19. And that is a £6.3 million cost increase across all our services for the rates that we pay. So that's frailty, adult and adult specialties, residential and non-residential. That is the largest cost Adult Care is forecasting to incur in 22-23. The second largest driver for our cost pressures is a continuation of demand in adult social care, particularly working age adults, particularly mental health. And you can see there that cost is 3.5 million, which works out about an average 4% increase in demand. That 4% is below the average built in, that was 11%, but that's based on what we're seeing in Lincolnshire. Moving on to page 20, you will see that at the top of page 20, we have now received a £2.273 million new grant. That grant is titled Market Sustainability and Fair Cost of Care, and that is for use in 22-23. There are conditions that come alongside that grant, and that is predominantly to support our market to move towards paying the fair cost of care as per the social care reforms in the Build Back Better. Adult Care does have a programme of service improvement which goes across the life of its MTFP, and I think we'll develop our financial reporting into scrutiny to include all of our medium-term financial plans, so you can see both the cost and the improvement programme and how those finances play across the MTFP. The key improvements underway are detailed in section 2.8, predominantly the continued investment in frontline services. That's to enable, we've got pilots running at the moment to enable us to provide more services in the community and reduce our demand going into the more costly residential care. The second bullet point is our financial assessment improvement programme, which now forms quite a fundamental building block into the social care reforms. That end-to-end process of bringing our financial, or turning the lead in time for our financial assessments, making sure we've got our move to gross in 22-23, and the focus on our income collection, our credit control processes, will form a fundamental need as we move to the new social care processes. We continue to have our Better Care Fund in place in 22-23. We haven't as yet received the national publication of what that framework will look like. That's still awaited nationally. We did, however, receive confirmation in the settlement that was published on the 16th of December that the improved Better Care Fund element of that, so the IBCF that comes directly into the council, will receive an inflationary uplift, which for Lincolnshire is just over £1 million. That's the first inflationary uplift we've had in the IBCF for the last 2 to 3 years. We've got there on section 4 a continuation of our capital programme, and you can see there from the table that the proposal is that continued the majority spend and this majority investment into the housing agenda. We did, during this financial year, increase our capital allocation for the Grantham Day services. So you can see we've got a £13.7 million capital programme in place. The table in section 5.1 does start to break down the expectations now of our funding changes as a result of the reforms. And the way I've tried to show that is the trail from the 5.4 billion that was included within the Build Back Better publication in September. The autumn statement split that down into the 3.6, which is predominantly for the fair cost of care and the capital thresholds, and then the 1.7, which will support our wider social care system. And you can see then in the next table, I've broken down the high-level indications that we've received to date. And then at the minute, we only have the one element coming in as confirmed into LCC, which is the 2.273 million. And that figure has now been confirmed will be allocated into adult care budgets directly. To ensure we are eligible to continue to receive the next 2 years of that grant funding, you'll see there are conditions attached on the top of page 22, sorry. And those 3 elements that LCC, as all local authorities, need to deliver by September 22 include a cost of care exercise across all of our services. And Adult Care DLT has now approved that to be all home care, community supported living and daycare services, to enable us to understand the scale of gap between the rates that are included in our MTFP and the actual cost of delivery with our providers. That will also feature a market sustainability plan and then a spend report. So in September, we will have needed to have confirmed exactly how we excuse me, have spent that £2.273 million grant to be eligible to receive the 23-4 and the 24-5 allocations. We do need to also work in 22-23 to understand how we can change our systems and processes to introduce the care cap and the means tests that we know come in October 2023. We'll work through the cost impact of those. That's not yet included within the adult care budget. So for the committee today, the proposal is that the budget as it currently stands will cover the costs that we need. The budget going to council in full February proposes that it has that 3% adult social care precept that was deferred applied to cover the cost pressures. Any costs arising from the social care reforms in 22-23 are currently covered via that dedicated grant. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that. So, okay, so we're looking at a 3% precept to address the budget. We've got the budget figures in there and any comments back to the executive. So I think myself, there's no choice but to do the 3%. I think it sort of highlights in some sense, it's all very well sort of we can hold back at times, but we never know what next year brings. And there is always a sense of trying to sort of manage these in an appropriate way, because this year financially, suddenly there's a lot of pressure suddenly come out on people's income from fuel costs and VAT and all the other bits and bobs and NI and things that it actually suddenly is going to be a bit of a hard time. But unfortunately, in the world that we're at, adult social care is under huge pressure, and we've got to look at sort of moving forward. I think for me that the key elements of looking at the sort of going forward is with the social care reforms, we now know what is potentially coming at us. We're going to have a lot more assessments. We're going to have to make more financial assessments. And with all this coming and the fact that we've got other pressures within the existing system, we at least can get geared up. We know what's coming in 2023, and we need to get really geared up and be slick in terms of the way we assess, the way that we signpost people. We know it's coming, and actually we can be ready, and that's, I think, got to be the key message, is really gearing up to the new reforms that are coming, so that, in effect, I would love to say that we actually had all assessments done within 14 days rather than 28 days and really push on. But the assessment and signposting is key to really the start of people's journey in the world of adult social care, and so that we are supporting the people of Lincolnshire. Okay, any questions? Trevor, Councillor Trevor Young.
Just on that subject, Chairman, on the social care reform, fair cost for care, that suggests to me that that for the customer there would be a saving somewhere within the process, a financial saving. And the question is really, has there been any analysis on that? And I heard from the officer that that work's not yet started, but for a council and for a committee, I think that's really important, that we understand what that long-term implication is going to be, and especially for the customer. Because when social care reform was first brought to our attention, the headlines was that it's going to be a fairer system, there's going to be possibly savings for individuals, whether that's on their weekly care cost or through the ceiling rates in terms of financial ceiling rates, or the long-term cost of their care through the lifetime. And I think we need to understand that from a council perspective. And I'd be very disappointed if there isn't a saving for individuals in terms of, that promise that this was going to be a solution for customers. At the end of the day, that it's a very expensive cost to them, that there is a saving, and what that saving would be, and what the impact it will be on us as a council. I don't see it coming forward. I would have liked to have seen some detail in the report on that, because I think it's key for us to understand what that implication is going to be.
So, thank you for that. So, Glenn, would you like to respond?
Yes, thank you, Chair. And I'll also encourage Pam to consider whether she wants to contribute as well. Sorry, excuse me. The Prime Minister in September did announce his intention to address what is commonly seen as an unfair and inequitable system for charging for social care between those people who pay privately and those who receive public support. There is a differential, and it applies irrespective of where you are in the country. Pam has alluded to that in terms of the work that we're commissioning to look at what that differential looks like in Lincolnshire. That work has been concluded for the residential sector, but we still have more work to do. So there is going to be a cost reduction for people paying privately today when the changes come in 2023. However, the public narrative probably has not reflected that cost reduction won't be as great as might have been anticipated. The cost reduction in large measure is because there will be a higher ceiling before you start to, as it were, receive state subsidy, and also that there will be a cap on how much you pay. But what you pay is only related to your personal costs. The hotel costs associated with the changes will still be borne by the individual. I think it's fair to say that the briefings we provided to scrutiny and to the executive related to our best guess following both the Prime Minister's announcements and the Chancellor's at the end of last year indicated what we thought would be the pinch points for us in Lincolnshire. Two key messages from that was that we thought the number of financial assessments that we have to undertake will probably double from 10,000 to 20,000 a year because we will be financially assessing privately funded recipients of care, but also that the The consequences of having to address the differential between state-funded and private costs would take the vast majority of the money that was announced by the Chancellor to pay for social care in the future. So it isn't actually going to pay for social care for those who are currently publicly funded. It's going to largely subsidise people who are currently privately paying for that care. And the analysis indicated the vast majority of the $5+ billion would have to go towards that. I'd be very happy to share the slides again, Chair, if committee members would like that.
Okay, thank you. I think, yeah, I mean, that basically there is a benefit, depends which category you really fall into, but I think also the benefit really needs to be about having a process system of assessments that is very quick and slick for people with great signposting, so that actually we don't increase costs, we just make the whole process much more slicker and fluid so that people get a better service. Councillor Lee?
Thanks. I just wanted to comment on that because my mum went into residential care in the summer, late August, and she went into a home. I wanted her to have one that was dementia specialised because that was her problem. And if you go into just what you're allocated to, she could have ended up anywhere having anything. And I thought she'd worked all of her life, and it was up to, because she was going to be privately funded, I thought it was important that she got the very best standard and what was most appropriate. And her room, she's moved now because her care needs have increased and she's had to go to a different room, but her initial room was £850 per week. And I understand, because I've got a friend who's a social worker at the hospital who was really helpful and helped me because I was struggling to understand it. I think the local authority pays something like $533 a week. So there's a huge difference between privately and state-funded care. And essentially, the people who pay privately were cushioning the state people. And, you know, I don't think there's anything wrong with that, actually. My mum had got some savings and she could afford to pay for what she needed. But the thing that I do feel is very unfair is that ultimately now, when the system changes, I mean, my mum is very ill now, so it's not going to start yet anyway, is it? But it's going to be now, the cap is something like 96 or 98,000 over a lifetime. But do you know what? My mum's got a really nice house and that'll leave quite a lot of money over. But for somebody like me, for instance, whose house is worth a lot less than what my mum's is, I think that's really unfair because they'd have to sell their house ultimately. Her costs are deferred, but for someone in a £150,000 house, that's nearly all of your money gone. But with my mum's house, there'll be lots left over. So actually, these changes are benefiting the wealthier. And as we've heard, the cuts in the weekly rate are benefiting the wealthier. And I'm sorry, but I don't think that that's fair. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mike Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm glad to see we're getting some money from the government, but obviously, could the officers indicate with these extra funds that we've got, will we still be short for what we want to provide for our residents? And similarly, on the Build Back Better section, do the officers think we're going to be able to recruit the right people from within Lincoln to meet our needs?
Glenn?
Thank you, Chair. Really good questions. I do feel that the government changes talk primarily to the reform of privately funded social care. And it is part of national policy expectation that councils will have to determine how they fund the public element of social care. And this is where the precept comes in. That's something that all councils are having to face at the moment, which is that it would be a local taxation approach for publicly funded service recipients, whereas the government subsidy system, which comes in 23, will cover off, as it were, some of the costs associated with people paying privately. House values are an important element in that. So if you're in Surrey, the differential there is far greater than the differential between public and private in Lincolnshire, because in part, capital has a bearing on that differential. The key issue that I would focus on is our ability, both locally and nationally, to recruit enough people to do the work in a growing market for social care. And that market is growing in large measure because there are more people requiring support, far more people likely to require that support at home. I think the government's measures will encourage more people to want to stay at home because the hotel costs aren't going to be subsidised. It's only your personal care costs. The current labour market structurally is pretty weak in terms of recruitment potential, and there was a national report published last week which suggested that the ability to recruit has declined over the last 2 months compared to the year 1920. 21-22 suggests a lower level of recruitment into social care, and that in part is driven by other changes in other sectors, retail, hospitality, and so forth, but also because of the migrant economic community, which has declined, is also having a bearing on the availability of people to do the work. It's one of the reasons why the digital programme is so important, that where we can move to digital platforms, allowing those people who are prepared to work in the sector to do the hands-on work that we desperately need. There's some 21,000 people working in the care sector in Lincolnshire. That's way more than in health. That's also true nationally. Social care is the bigger labour market when compared with the NHS. The challenge for us is to be able to compete with the retail sector, with the hospitality sector, and it's one of the reasons why we used one of the COVID grants to bring forward the national living wage uplift from the 1st of April to the 1st of December. The challenge, though, is what happens when all those COVID grants cease to be provided by the government, and we are left with a situation where those grants no longer exist. It has helped us this year to get through with the pressures we've faced. I worry more about the next 2 to 3 years.
Can I just come back on that? Is there any sort of thinking out of the box, as it were, to try and find recruiting pockets where there would be possible suitable people for the job who haven't thought about going into care, and therefore, as it were, with prompting or encouragement to try it? Or should the market be more flexible to allow people, instead of having a full-time job as a carer, that they would do part-time?
Just also on this there is an element of, in effect, training up some of because they all say it's about training and development. It's actually also about wage increases as well, and actually bridging the gap to nurses and making sure that there's a ladder of progression, and as we all go up the ladder, then the pay rises and it gives incentives to a better career all round. And there is a sense here that often in rural areas we are having 2 people go to the same area to do 2 different jobs, and there's also an approach of we should upskill people to multitask so that they actually earn more but save us and be more efficient in the way that we deliver services. There's no point 2 people going to the same village when 1 person can do the same job and actually just go to 2 houses, but they're skilled and trained to do the 2 different tasks. Glenn?
Thank you, Chair. Thinking in the box is no longer tenable. So we do, and because we have very strong relationships with the provider market, and also with our NHS colleagues, and also the third sector, the voluntary sector, we're able to stretch our thinking because other contributors to that thinking can make a big difference. We're looking at improving the skill mix, which is something I know that the Chair is interested in, which is that people can do more. So care workers historically have not undertaken a number of nursing tasks, but in the community they can. There's quite a lot of tasks that don't need a nurse, a qualified nurse, to undertake them, but they do need levels of appropriate supervision and support and training. So if we think about diabetes treatment in the community, again, that's something that we have piloted locally. Fluids, again, we're piloting in the community with the support of our NHS colleagues. In terms of the part-time nature of some of the work, one of the things that we've also been quite successful in, particularly on the East Coast, with the hospitality trade, is when the hospitality trade has a downturn in demand, particularly at this time of year, the skill mixes are relatively transferable, and we've had some success with some of the bigger hospitality organisations in targeting their staff when there's no longer work in hospitality to come and work in the care sector. What's interesting is that the labour market in the 15th and 16th century typically reflected that disposition, which is you do different things in the winter compared to what you did in the summer. Sorry, a bit of a history lesson there. I think the other point, though, is that we're looking at ways in which we can attract young people into the sector. And we're one of the few parts of the country with a care worker college at the City College here in Lincoln. I went there about a year ago to meet the young people who are being encouraged to think about care work and also a career structure that would suit. It wasn't too long ago that I reported to committee that one of my assistant directors used to be a residential care worker. And she now has got a promotion with Doncaster. So it is possible to see quite a strong career ladder, not just in social care, but through into health routes as well. Occupational therapy, physiotherapy and nursing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Can I just come back? Sorry.
Yeah.
Also, Glenn has failed to say that some of our home care providers are going into schools and trying to talking to the 15, 16-year-olds to try and get them on, to catch them before they leave school, to get them into that career. And also, when they are in home care, we are encouraging people to train up to nurses as well. So we are, putting people through so they do get the qualifications that they need.
Excellent, thank you. Hold on, Councillor Lee. I've got Councillor Mark Whittington and then Councillor Nicky Clark.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I think Councillor Lee has got it completely right. It does subsidise the wealthier homeowners, these reforms, especially those wealthier homeowners in the southeast of England. Potentially, I think we know that for many years, to a certain extent, private people paying privately have been in effect I want to say subsidising the system, but from the perspective of care homes especially, they do have differential rates between private residents and council-funded residents, and in many respects, if you have running a care home and you need a certain amount of money to do that, you look at your income. So of course, if there is a cap on local authority funded residents, you will try and meet the gap through higher rates for private residents. My concern is that what will happen is that there will no longer be, post these reforms, a differential there. And the reality is that probably private residents will pay less, but the amount that the council has to pay will go up and will increase because he will have to cover that gap. So potentially we're looking at real cost pressures coming in for local authorities because we know demand's going up. We know that our unit costs will go up as well because the differential will go. We know that we're going to have to pretty much double the number of financial assessments that we do. There's an awful lot of cost pressure there. Now I know that some potentially I know that Pam and the Adult Social Care Finance team run a really very good detailed financial modelling system that they can model all this stuff through. But I do have real concerns that potentially we could be looking at millions of pounds. We're going to have to find out. I know I was at a meeting a while ago, and Norfolk County Council, which I'm guessing has probably got a roughly similar demographic to us. I mean, it's hard to compare. But they think that the possible impact of these reforms on their baseline budgets could be as high as 10 million to 12 million extra. You know, it's going to be really, really difficult for councils to find that, because that will be, but on top of that as well, there'll be the standard, well, I don't want to say standard, but we know from a demographic point of view that we've got an ageing population, so we've got the natural demographic demand increasing, we've got this cost pressure, as I say, coming in from the reforms, and I just don't think the government get it. I think, you know, that they are going to have to increase the level of funding to local authorities, and I know that they're saying that the increase in national insurance, you know, at some point, and initially it's going towards the NHS, and at some point some of that will come back to local authorities. But I have to say I have reservations about whether or not that will happen. As somebody who's worked in both the NHS and local government, I know the NHS wants to get hold of money. They're very reluctant to let it go. But I'm just wondering, but around potentially, would the proposed move towards integrated care systems, would that help to mitigate some of those costs, or is that you know, because to me potentially that might mitigate some of the costs. It's very difficult to see how because the cost pressures and the financial risk to me just seem really, really, really high. So I think we have no option but to increase the precept by the 3%. I think this is probably a holding position for a year, because I'm not quite sure what the government are actually doing. They may decide to come back with next year's financial settlement and do something a bit different. But I've got real alarm bells ringing in my mind about the cost pressures that's coming down the track to all local authorities. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Do you want to...
Briefly, Chair. Couple of items. The change around government policy on integrated care systems has been put back to July from the 1st of April. In Lincolnshire, the experience has often been that NHS colleagues who we have agreed to jointly commission a service with have typically wanted to buy services at our rates. When it comes to the private market, which of course we're more familiar with, the NHS colleagues, I think, are typically not getting the best value out of that. So they tend to use the council's commercial expertise and commissioning practice. Intermediate care beds is a case in point. Some of the children's services is another example. The changes that the fair cost of care will introduce could have an impact on that, because some providers also look at the subsidy that they can create by receiving NHS commissioned activity to subsidise what we pay. So it's a very complicated picture. You've also introduced, Councillor Whittington, the comment around the Better Care Fund, which of course is a missing piece in the jigsaw that neither I nor Pam are able to report on at the moment, but remains a very significant element in our ability to manage our budgets into the future, notwithstanding the 3% precept, which, although it's above my batting average, I would welcome member support for.
Thank you. Okay, got Councillor Nicola Clark.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Glenn. You've answered actually some of my question about people and about recruitment, but given the fact that you've said that and we know that the labour market is weak, how are Lincolnshire, because it's people we need, isn't it, to run the service, essentially, we need people, and people have now come to expect at a certain time in their life they're going to need care, and they're going to have to pay for it. That's it. That's the way it has got to be. But how can we deliver that service without the people? And how is Lincolnshire going to attract people to come and work here when we know it's so difficult to attract people to come and work in the healthcare system? Doctors, nurses, they don't stay here. They might train here and then they go away. So what are we doing to retain those people? And how can we make, you have alluded to training around the care system, those people, and we have seen that on the TV, have felt as though they were undervalued because they didn't have the sufficient training, they weren't comparable to their NHS colleagues. So how are we going to change that and make Lincolnshire an attractive place to come and work in the care sector, and also to make the care sector more attractive? Because when people pay for care, they look around to where they're going to get the best care, whether it's going to be in one of our run care homes, or they're going to pay a bit extra privately. And there are all these different prices. I've had to do that with my own mother. And people want to be in a nice place. They want to be in a place where they're going to be fed nicely. They want nice local food. They want to have a nice room that's clean with nice people that's going to talk to them and give them the time of day. Now, at some point in time, we're not going to be able to deliver that. It's going to be too much to deliver. And so we've come so far down the line, I think, about care and the expectation of care that it's taken it away from where you see it in the Mediterranean countries and Asian countries. People are valued and they're cared for at home. What are we doing also to help people stay at home and help their families to look after them?
I think, well, there's various things here. I think, one, we perhaps ought to bring the workforce whole agenda back to a future meeting, as this is sort of an element of the budget and we're here to discuss the sort of budget and the precepts. So I agree with what you said, and I think the other thing is we have to pass comment on to the executive, and I think that we'll make sure that training and development and stimulating the labour market and keeping the labour market is one of the things that we will put as a focus and a priority, I think would be a fair reflection. Is there anything further, Glenn, you want to say? I mean, you are working on it and it is a priority, but it does come under the labour and skills, and we do need to bring it back in and actually perhaps just have further update on that. So, okay. Over to you, Simon. Okay, right, we've got Councillor Rob Kendrick and then Councillor Lee, and then we'll start to wrap it up. Owen, Colin, then at the end.
Thanks, Chairman. I have to agree that we have to go with the 3%, but I think taking a sort of overview on this one, it seems to be another case of government passing things down to local authorities to deal with, and not necessarily fully funding things, as I think colleagues have mentioned. And it's a difficult situation we're in, but yes, I do support the proposal. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Lee, you wanted to come back?
Thank you, Chair. I'd endorse everything that Councillor Nicola Clark said. I absolutely agree with her. I mean, and I think you said it as well, it is about wages. When my mum first went in August, they were all in the care home, they were desperately short-staffed, and they were all on minimum wage. That changed over the next 2 or 3 months, and all of a sudden they got somebody new managing, and I have to say she's amazing. She really motivates the staff. She's really good, and it makes a difference. The people before were fine, but they didn't motivate in the same way. They're getting more training now, and they've raised the hourly rate as well. They were fully staffed for a bit. They're not again now, but they're not. It's not the way that it was originally. So I do agree, and I know I saw something last week in the media. There was a cross-party parliamentary report. Can I just say, can you get to the point? 'Cause I'm
yes,
I will. Yeah, but everybody else has had their say. Yeah. And there are 103,000 vacancies in social care and 93,000 in NHS care. So I do think it is important. I'd agree with Nicola as well that they're not all nice places. They really aren't all nice places. I do know that, and I think just a couple of other things. I don't think that the current changes to social care that we've heard about are tenable. This idea that the very wealthy pay as much for their social care as people who've only got very modest homes, it's not tenable. And given the situation that we're in, I know it's not, but where we and it is pertinent where we are politically today, I think we might see changes in several policy areas going forward. And just finally, I completely agree with Councillor Kendrick that government do pass things down to local authorities, and actually this shouldn't really be what we're dealing with, but it's been forced upon us by government. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Colin Matthews.
Yes, thank you very much. I was going to ask Glenn to actually sing his praises, or that of the team, because we're hearing that we need to do this and we need to do that and the government needs that, but actually I think we're running a very tight ship here, and I think we're doing some really good work in terms of training and promoting our own staff. For instance, there was a question raised about the Apprenticeship Levy, and we have an apprenticeship scheme within health social care, and I wonder if actually Glenn could give us the glass half full thing about all the concerns and how we're addressing, because I think we're doing pretty well here. I think we've got to go for the 3%, but I think we're beating ourselves up quite unnecessarily. Actually, this is a good service.
Yeah, thank you. Glenn, you've got a minute to give yourself the glory and your team.
Thank you. I appreciate the comments, although there's a real test of humility here, because I am dependent upon so many people doing the job when we had our Christmas lunch. I'm very dependent upon our partners, both within the NHS, but also the district councils, the third sector, the volunteers out there who are also contributing significantly, and to my own colleagues within the directorate. So if you like, it is a team, a genuine team effort here in Lincolnshire, and I think that marks us out as a system. We have a strong reputation for that if you talk regionally and nationally to other colleagues. And we're also quite pragmatic. There is a danger that we become overly protective of different areas of activity when actually shared endeavour is probably the better way to go. And I think an example of that, Chair, if I may, is a paper that Derek will be presenting to you shortly on one such example.
Thank you very much. Okay, I'll summarise up, Mark, unless... Okay.
It's picking up a point that Councillor Nicola Clark made. My experience with my mum when she was in residential care was initially she was in quite a large home run by quite a large, well-known national provider, and it tended to be quite not automated care, but it was. She then went into a smaller care home, a lot more personalised, and there was more interaction. My big fear is that it could be those small providers who no longer can go on. It won't become financially viable for them anymore. So they'll go, and they tend to be the ones that offer the specialised personal care bits that, you know, specific needs. And all we'll end up with will be these great, huge, massive chains in these 400 or 500 bed care homes, one of which has just been built in Grantham. And actually, then it starts to become almost like a factory production line, if you know what I mean. And for me, I think that would be an awful retrograde step if we lost those small providers. But my fear is they're the ones who financially may not be able to carry on if these reforms go through. Thank you.
Thank you. Some of those small care providers, actually, if they diversify into home care, then they can actually be a real asset. But so, to summarise up, the cost pressures we know are huge and they are potentially out there, but they need to feed into the medium-term financial plan so that it actually contributes to future budget settings. I think when we look at sort of the whole concept, we are getting a feeling, but we'll vote on it in the minute that we accept the 3% because of all the pressures that are with adults. We also have to remember that going forward as a council, we have cost pressures all over the place, and in the end it will become our choice as a council to make choices, unfortunately, because I think there's going to be further cost pressures in every sector, whether it's children's services, highways and all the rest. So we are here to bat for adults, and we appreciate the massive work that goes on, but there will be choices, and that's why it's imperative that we have a good feed into the medium-term financial plan. To the executive, I think innovation is key. We've got assessments and signposting, and we have financial assessments. Those processes need to be efficient. We've got neighbourhood workings and neighbourhood teams which need to be very effective, and they're coming in 2023, including social prescribing. And I think digitalisation and technology is a great way of communicating. I saw a thing the other day where you can be on a Teams meeting for £60 by buying this gadget. Imagine those that are in social isolation that actually start to be connected by a £60 simple gadget that just allows them to talk to each other. I think that's, this is the future that we have to look at, rather than relying on people going round, which is actually they're going round to do jobs. We talk about training, developing and stimulating the labour market and being able to multitask better and innovative workings. And then, of course, to bring it all together, we need an integrated care system which is being developed. And are we in a good place for that? Well, when the chief exec of Lincolnshire Community Health has gone to ULHT, he technically knows both systems. So actually, between our sort of adult care and public health and himself, we should be in a good place so that everyone knows their systems and really develops an integrated care system. So, are we happy with that summary, and are we happy with 3%? Can I have a proposer and a seconder, please? Proposed by Councillor Rob Kendrick, seconded by Councillor Mike Clark. All those in favour? Unanimous? Unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay, so we'll move on to, we're going now to go to public health arrangements for Greater Lincolnshire. So I'd like to welcome Derek Ward, Director of Public Health, on this one. We brought this forward while we have both our Executive Directors here. Glenn?
Thank you, Chair. If I just briefly introduce this, Derek will deal with any difficult questions to follow. Okay. I think the first thing to mention is that the initiative for this particular development, subject to members today, will also go to Executive in February. I think February the 8th is the due date for Executive to make a determination. There is a parallel process with our two Northern Unitary colleagues in North and North East Lincolnshire. The three leaders of those councils have been very supportive of this particular development, and it is their support that we have, as it were, used to get thus far. We know that there is a connection with other developments, such as with registrar services, looking at a Greater Lincolnshire offer that broadens our ability and touches on some of the things that members have already talked about in terms of workforce. Because if we operate at on a wider footprint, those resources could possibly be, as it were, distributed better, and also some of the skills that are there better used. If this is approved by members, and if it is approved by our two northern colleagues, Derek would take on responsibility for a population just a little bit over 1.1 million. There are other directors of public health in the country who have similar populations to support. I think the challenge here, Chair, is that over the next 18 months as part of this pilot, Derek will be busy with his colleagues looking at what could happen if members are minded to, as it were, make this pilot into a formal structure. What more could we do to our population, for our populations, in better supporting them through public health offer? And I'm particularly confident that with Derek's leadership, a lot more could, as it were, take place if we work collectively, subject to members' support, of course. I'll hand over to Derek there.
Excellent, thank you. Derek, do you want to just come in?
Yep, thanks very much. The key points are in the document and in the annex, so I'll just pick a couple out really. The proposal would be, technically, I'd be formally seconded into the role of Director of Public Health in both North and North East Lincolnshire. Obviously, I'm substantively in that post here already. The role of the Director of Public Health is a statutory chief officer of a council, and you have to be professionally registered to do that. The proposal would be I would manage all of the senior public health staff across the 3 organisations and obviously discharge the statutory responsibilities of both the Director of Public Health, one of which we're going to talk about in a minute with the DPH annual report, but also in terms of the statutory functions of the upper tier authorities in terms of public health. All of that's in the legislation, so I won't go through that. If we jump a little bit to the appendix, I think the key thing for me about this proposal is there's no sense in doing this unless we're going to improve the offer and the health and well-being of the people of Greater Lincolnshire, and that includes all of the 750,000 people that are currently covered through Lincolnshire County Council, plus the populations of North and North East Lincolnshire as well. And there are a number of potential advantages to this model. We have a Greater Lincolnshire local enterprise partnership, as Glenn's already alluded to. There is probably one of the key drivers, if not the key driver of health and well-being, is education and income and the job that you've got, so there's a clear overlap there. There are benefits in terms of bringing what are 3 different organisations together and providing one strategic direction. I think a lot of people across the 3 authorities would just describe themselves as residents of Lincolnshire and probably wouldn't make the distinctions that we would make in terms of an upper tier authority. And so there are clearly advantages and benefits of bringing the public health delivery mechanism together. And we already know that there are a number of areas where the 3 authorities actually commission public health services in a very similar way, substance misuse, for example, and there should be efficiencies and effectiveness in terms of looking to do that once. Having said that, really important to recognise that the core principles that are in the annex on page 80, it would be a single management structure, but there would be 3 employers. And nobody's employment would change, with the exception of myself being seconded into those 2 other organisations. Each authority would retain responsibility for the ring-fence grant. As I said, the 3 separate statutory organisations that the public health functions need to be discharged for, and the ring-fence grant would do that, although where it makes sense to commission once across the 3 in terms of efficiencies or effectiveness, then obviously that would be something we need to look at. This would be a pilot process. At the moment, the proposal is for 18 months with a block really of 12 months to work this through, to operationalise it, to actually do it, to look at the pros and cons of the model, ideally to get some independent evaluation so that scrutiny, executive of all 3 organisations can look at that and make an informed decision at about 12 months about probably three choices. 1, yes, this is really working well. We want to go through a process to formalise it. Option 2, there's some good stuff, there's some challenges. We need a bit more time and therefore expand the time as a pilot. And 3, no, this really isn't working for the people of Greater Lincolnshire and we want to stop it. And that final 6 months gives us time to operationalise whichever decision is made by members at that point. The final point just to note here, and will be of relevance and importance to scrutiny, is governance is going to be really important. It's going to be really important for me personally. Obviously, executive councillors in all 3 organisations will have requests, will want to be briefed, and really important that I do so equally. And so what we're proposing is to, and we're taking this from other places where there is a shared DPH model, to create a governance structure where there is one group that I would report to from a tactical and operational perspective. From a strategic perspective, as outlined in the legislation, the Director of Public Health, from a public health function, reports to the Chief Exec and the Leader of the Council, as everybody knows. But the day-to-day stuff would go through that governance mechanism. I'll pause there. Happy to answer questions as much as I can on the grounds that we actually haven't started yet, and we very much will learn as we go.
Thank you. From a personal perspective, I completely welcome this. My view is you need all the support and mechanisms to drive this agenda. Why? Because my boundary is on the boundary of North East Lincolnshire. I know what a boundary creates, and if I could see that diminish, especially in the whole world of health and adult social care, the better. We go to Grimsby Hospital, we go to Scunthorpe Hospital, and we come back to Lincolnshire. And actually, this is the tip of the iceberg. And as it is alluded to, it's a very complicated system of different boundaries, different integrated care systems, CCGs, etc., district councils, and the whole shooting match. But this is a start to a new collaborative working together, and it is absolutely, I think, the right way to go. I think, for me, focus and priority is your key. It really is sort of getting to grips with it. There's so much that we can also learn from both those two North and North East links. They do things in a way that we can't do things. They have much closer urban workings, you know, and they've got areas of deprivation that will actually help reform even our areas along the coast to support them better. So there's two-way learning, great opportunities here, and it'll be really interesting to know what you learn from them and what we can take to them as well. I think it really is a great initiative. I welcome it, and I think it's a wonderful opportunity. That's my bandstanding on this, but I do welcome it. Right, Councillor Carter.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not saying I don't agree with it at all, but I just have some questions. So I suppose, yes, I'm going to be more protective over Lincolnshire because I'm not on the board as such as yourself, Chairman. But on page 79, it tells us that it provides an experienced public health leadership. Well, actually, we have that already in Derek. So to me, by us sharing him as the lead DPH, we're actually reducing our dedication from him because it's shared with other people. So that would be my initial concern. Some of the things that are in there as advantages, actually, in my view, we should already be doing them. So it shouldn't matter that there is that physical county border there. We should be working down those to deal with whether it's drug misuse, coastal communities, health, that kind of thing. So a lot of that sharing, in my view, should be happening anyway, whether we enter into a partnership or not. It does bring some concerns to me that it's actually the governance arrangement needs to be explored, and the final proposal will be established once the arrangements are confirmed. That kind of tells me I'm buying a dress, but I don't know what size it is. To me, we should have that actually agreed and in principle, and that's what we are agreeing. The other thing is I don't feel that this committee is featured within this, consider as much of the governance. Instead, it's a couple of of the executive members from each council. So we may well get an update report, but I feel that will be about it. And my final other questions would be, what do they do well and not so well? So what are they bringing to us as a benefit that we're not already getting? I've said that I already feel that we risk losing a dedicated good leader that's only attention has been on us so far. What's been the driver of this other than money? Governance I've cutted about. What's the implications if this doesn't work? It's only a pilot, so what's the implications? Health issues, where do we differ on priorities? I would imagine we're very similar. And as a team, are North and North East fully staffed, and how do their teams compare to size-wise and levels of work of us? So there's quite a bit in there, but thank you, Derek.
Derek?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Carter. In terms of the senior leadership, clearly I would be covering the three upper tier authorities. There's nothing I can say about that. What I do know is that North and North East Links have a couple of consultants each, whereas in Lincolnshire we've got 2 consultants at the moment, although we've got 2 vacancies. So we go from, in effect, 2 to 6 consultants, professionally qualified consultants across Greater Lincolnshire. And that, to me, I think is an example of one of the opportunities of sharing a senior leadership team across Greater Lincolnshire. I won't go any more detail because obviously that will come out. So completely accept the point that my time will be split across 3 upper tier authorities. I think, and my job will be to try to make sure that that is offset by the increased capacity at a senior level that we can share across. Governance. In principle, we've got a model, which is that it would be the executive councillors of the 3 organisations coming together along with either the chief exec or a nominated senior officer to provide that day-to-day, and it's very much day-to-day operational governance is what we're looking at. I would still report through to here for scrutiny, in the same way I'd report to scrutiny arrangements in North and North East Lincolnshire, wherever that was appropriate. So it wouldn't change me coming to this scrutiny in any way, shape or form. It would just be the day-to-day operational and tactical arrangements at the moment. What they do well and what they do not so well is really part of the due diligence and the discovery phase, I think. And I mentioned the first 12 months and then a decision and then the final 6 months. I think that first 12 months, the first couple of months for me is very much focused on understanding the lay of the land. Just like I did when I first came into Lincolnshire, I would need to do that, and I'm already in those conversations with North and North East Lincolnshire, subject to obviously councillor support and approval. But they definitely will do some things that we'll want to learn from, and that's part of the opportunity. There will be pros and cons, absolutely, and we will make sure, I will make sure I come back to scrutiny in all 3 organisations and keep everybody up to date and keep feeding back throughout the process. Final thing to say is the whole point of the final 6 months is if we do decide to come out of the arrangements, whatever happens over the first 12 months, the scaffolding we put in place, and I use that phrase on purpose, we will be able to take down again without destabilising any of the structures, the inherent structures for public health in the 3 organisations. It would only be if we move to a permanent arrangement that we could start to change that. So there will be nothing that we do over the first 12 months that would inherently destabilise any of the organisations.
Excellent, thank you. Councillor Lee and then Councillor Rob Kendrick.
Thanks, Chair. I was going to start by saying that I'll probably be in a minority here if I did have any doubts, but clearly not, and I'm glad to see that. For me, I agree with Tracy. Some things are worth paying for, and this should not be just about saving money. I fully accept that we have to be careful with money, but it should be about getting good value for money, you know, the money that we do spend. For me, it's also vital that this is a pilot, so, you know, we can see how it works. The scrutiny as it goes along must be absolutely thorough, and the evaluation during and afterwards, bringing out what's worked and what's not worked, that has to be absolutely thorough and open and transparent. And the third thing, I looked at the reasons for recommendation, and to me, that if that reads, you know, that's a positive. And if it does deliver what it says in the reasons for the recommendation, if it does what it says on the tin, then I would be happy. And on the basis that this is a pilot, I would be happy to vote for it. If it was going to be permanent, I don't feel I would vote for it. But on the basis that it's a pilot, I will support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Rob Kendrick.
Thank you, Chairman. I think you touched on the issue of co-terminosity. There's so many problems with different boundary lines between different authorities. I think if we can clarify things a bit, that's a good point. And I'm sure Derek will be working on that one. The one thing I'm not very clear on, and perhaps Derek can clarify it for me, is obviously he is our Director of Public Health. Do you have Directors of Public Health for the two other authorities, or are they currently without Directors of Public Health? I was just wondering how it works in management terms. Thanks, Chairman.
So currently in North and North East, they've got acting directors of public health. So they've got, North has somebody externally who is covering the post for a set period of time. North East has one of their consultants acting up into that post.
Excellent, thank you. Andrew?
Thank you. I support these proposals. I think Lincolnshire is too often overlooked, so anything to give us more clout I think is a good thing. And I'm sure Lincolnshire and the other two authorities have a lot to learn from each other. I think we will learn from them as they will hopefully learn from us. Just my one question is, at the end of the pilot, if two authorities think it's a success and one doesn't, how will that be resolved? Thank you.
I think we will have that conversation at that point. I don't see that there would be, it must be all three at that point if two upper tier authorities, hopefully Lincolnshire County Council as my substantive employer would be one of them. If two authorities want to go this way and the other doesn't, then I'm sure that can be a proposal that would come back through scrutiny and executive for a decision.
Excellent. Councillor Colin Matthews and Mark Whittington.
Can I say, Chair, I think this is a fabulous idea. It's not a spur of the moment thing, I know, and it's about harmonising and raising standards across the whole territory. And I think, again, this is about, we are in a good place in Lincolnshire, and I think we can help colleagues in a partnership approach. I do have a how long is a piece of string question for Derek, and it's about the lead consultancy roles, because it clearly says that there will be a lead consultant in each of the three principal authorities. So Derek will be the strategic lead of those three consultants, but Derek also said that we have 2 vacancies in public health consultancy in Lincolnshire. Does that mean one of those recruiting gaps will be recruited to the lead consultant, or is one of the existing consultants going to become the acting lead? It's just it's a little bit of a technical question, but really I'm asking, are there public health consultants out there? Are we likely to be able to recruit? That was my question.
So the short answer in terms of the workforce is we aren't likely to be able to recruit over the next, say, 6 months. For understandable reasons with a global pandemic, consultants in public health are in quite short supply, and UK Health Security Agency and the Office for Health Improvement, Health Disparities, have sucked in quite a lot of consultants. I don't think that will be the case medium term, so I think we may well be in a better position to go out to recruit, say in 6 months' time. One of the challenges we have in Lincolnshire County Council is to recruit consultants. That is even more so the case in North and North East links. So there is a real benefit, in my view, professional view, of bringing the three together, because we are creating a much bigger team. We're going from 2 consultants to 6 consultants, not all whole-time equivalents, but 6 consultants across Greater Lincolnshire. And the lead consultant role will be, in my view, and obviously this is subject to further discussions, we would, wherever possible, have one lead for a topic area across Greater Lincolnshire. So, for example, in LCC already we've got Andy Fox leads on children and young people. Lucy's going to be taking that over because Andy's going to be covering more of the NHS side. There is no reason why, when we recommission our substance misuse services, we can't have one lead consultant across all 3 organisations. Obviously 3 different pots of money, but one consultant. The challenges and the needs will be assessed and then delivered in an integrated way. That's where I think there's some efficiencies and effectiveness, and also some resilience, because if somebody does go off sick, for example, or to be more positive, wins the lottery, we've got then some backup and somebody else that can step into that frame.
Excellent.
Thank you ever so much, Derek, because that sounds really positive. I don't know if I'd misread the recommendation in the paper, or if it's perhaps not put as clearly for less well-educated people like me, but the model you propose is not quite the model of lead consultants as written in the paper. I like your one much better, and that sounds a real benefit again.
I think this is a function of the three different authorities are likely to want slightly different things, and there will be a negotiation and a discussion through the governance mechanism for me to agree how we do things. And you'll understand at this point, really important that I'm not coming in saying this is how it must be. It is more, these are some of the ideas, we need to work them through individually and collectively.
As you said at the very beginning, it's a technical question. But, right, Mark?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. I think in principle, yes, this sounds like a great idea, but I've got a number of questions. I think some of them are around the governance have been kind of already addressed and picked up. And I think one of my issues, I think you started to cover in your last answer, Derek. It's if, we've got 3 local authorities, numerous CCGs, 2 integrated care systems, all of whom will have their own sort of specific priorities and things that for them are important. And it would just be how you deal with these tensions between the priorities that are likely to be there. And I think you kind of started to talk about that in your previous answer, because for me, I think that's going to be an issue. And potentially, through discussion, you might start to iron some of these out, and you start to coalesce around sort of agreed, shared priorities. But and I'm pleased this is just a pilot, because I think, like Councillor Lee, I don't think I can vote for this if it was done and dusted and this was it, because I still think there are a lot of questions that need to come back through the pilot. And I'm assuming that at some point, before we decide yes or no, this will be coming back here to this committee for a final yes or no, as it were. And secondly, around finance and budgets, and I know you were talking about that, the public health grants would be sort of ring-fenced for each of the 3 councils, but at some point you would look to potentially to start looking at some joint funding of stuff. Now, when I worked in the health service as an accountant, I was part of a team that commissioned services for the whole East Midlands. So we had a model that all the counties in the East Midlands were paying into. And it started off, and we agreed the initial contribution, everybody started paying in. But over time, as demand started to shift, some counties went, actually, we're still paying this, but our demand's going down. Are we starting to cross-subsidise other parts of the system? So there's always that tension, and I'm guessing at some point, I mean, this may not happen during the pilot, because I'm guessing this is something that might be maybe a bit further down the line when you start to join the commission stuff. But I think you'll need some really strong financial governance arrangements around that and how you would control that, because inevitably it can cause tensions if people thinking of, well, our part of our budget is now paying for somebody else, and it can cause issues. So just a little bit of reassurance around that. But I say in principle today, yes, happy to support, but just I think when we get the final report back at the end of the pilot, I think that'll be important that we understand if all of the advantages have been kind of realised and a lot of the disadvantages as were have been kind of addressed. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks. We've only got 5 minutes before Code Gold takes over.
And the Director of Public Health annual report as well. Yeah, absolutely, Councillor Whittington, all of those points very much take on board. Very similar points to conversations we have as LCC with our NHS partners, and we've got one of the biggest better care funds in the country. So they're not insurmountable, but they do have to be very carefully worked through. So I agree with that.
Thank you. Councillor Mike Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got a couple of questions. I welcome this pilot on this joint approach, and would hope if there's any future cost savings made, that could be put back into the funding of the healthcare. And secondly, if this project was to become successful, If the three authorities make it work, would you foresee it becoming a single unit, but who would then control it?
So in terms of your first point, I absolutely agree. That would be, as the Director of Public Health, any potential efficiencies that we can reinvest through the public health approach would absolutely be my primary concern. In terms of longer term, I think we'd have to work that through, to be honest. If it were to be permanent, at the moment, as outlined in the paper, the principle, apart from for my post, is one team, if you like, but three separate employing organisations. I think what would happen if it were to be made permanent would need to fit within the strategic direction of bigger discussions around devolution and other issues. So I think that would be one for the executive, and then obviously would need to be worked through with legal and commercial, etc.
Excellent. Okay, so summarise up for notes going to the executive. I think it's fair to say that we support this in its pilot scheme and welcome it. I think in some sense, page 82.5, successful criteria is actually the sort of benchmark for success on this. Although I'd perhaps add one more, which is, in effect, I think it's a great opportunity to develop reform in public health, adult social care and NHS, and tearing down the boundaries which causes issues within Lincolnshire. I think the key thing for this committee is we would like to see reports come back on progress on this, but at the same time, reading the report, we do not need extra work created to, in effect, because you're going to be reporting to the various powers to be, and I think that those reports can be sort of adapted to come to this committee to keep us updated. This isn't just to look at again at the end, this is about progress and ensuring. And I think the governance arrangement perhaps wants just making sure it's strengthened and it's solid. And the other area which I've got down would be to ensure that you are resourced for this pilot scheme in both financial and, in effect, from support from colleagues. And Councillor Lee?
Thanks, Chair. In the wording to executive, I'm not prepared to vote to say that I welcome it. As I've said, I welcome it as a pilot, but I'm not prepared to say that I welcome it per se. So if you omit, we welcome it, because for me it's about the scrutiny and evaluation, and then we decide at the end of it if we welcome it. If you're going to put welcome into it, I'm going to abstain. Whereas if you just leave that out, I will vote in favour of the pilot. Thank you.
Well, it is a pilot scheme in this thing, and so...
Yeah, but I'm not prepared to vote in favour of the word welcome it. I'm sorry, I don't know what I'm welcoming.
Anyone else got any? Councillor Carter?
Just a quick one. On point 2 in the success criteria, how well is it discharging the statutory and mandatory functions across the Greater Lincolnshire area? Can it be referenced somehow to in comparison to now? So we want to kind of compare to make sure that going out on its own, we don't get a report that says, oh, we've got nothing to compare it to because this is our first year as a group. So that comparable is there.
Yeah, and I suppose you've got focus and priorities will be one of the outcomes of the work that you're doing, and then at the end there will be a summarising up at the end of the 12 months to really seeing the benefits of integration and collaboration. Okay?
Chair, can you just clarify if you're keeping welcome in or taking it out?
We'll leave welcome out. We'll put, I think there isn't, it's not about, it's a word, isn't it? We do welcome it in a sense. It's whether welcome is quite the right word. What's anybody think? I mean, in effect, it's a change of innovation on the table. And we certainly don't stand hostile to it. We welcome, in effect, this. We support. Fine. Thank you. Support? Okay. We support the recommendation. Okay. Good luck, Derek. and make sure this works. Make sure it works. You're going because you've got to go. Do you need to go?
Sorry, Chair, I've just, through Teams, told the Strategic Coordination Group I'll do the public health update a little bit later on the agenda, so I can stay for 10-15 minutes and cover the DPH item.
Okay, brilliant. Well, what I'll say is if you want to then introduce it and set it going, and then if there's follow-ups and you've got to leave, we can pass the comments back to you.
Okay, thanks very much.
Emily?
Sorry, Chairman, can I just take a vote on the agreement of the recommendations
Right, okay,
before?
yeah. A proposer, Andrew, seconded, Mark, all in favour? Everyone in favour? Thank you, thank you. Okay, so we'll now go to item number 7, Director of Public Health Annual Report. Derek.
Thank you, Chair. Very much links into the previous conversation. As everybody on this scrutiny will be fully aware, I, as the Director of Public Health for Lincolnshire, have a statutory responsibility to write and produce a Director of Public Health Annual Report, and the Council has a statutory responsibility to publish it. But in the 3 years I've been here, it's been really important to make sure that we've kept scrutiny, kept executive fully informed of the process, and we're now at a point where we've got a publishable version. You have the draft version just because of the lead-in time with papers having to go out, so the final version has been produced. And the actions, as it says, is basically to receive it because it's a statutory responsibility on me to note the actions, and then very happy to pick up any specific points. Everybody will be pleased to know I won't go through in detail the document. Hopefully people have had a chance at least to skim through. What I'll do is pick out the key points from my perspective. As you'll see, it is, and I've always wanted to do this in Lincolnshire, a report on children and young people's health and well-being, both broadly and specifically in terms of COVID. And I'll start with these and I'll finish with these. The key points, the 3 key areas I'd ask all members of scrutiny to focus on are: we need to recognise, and this sounds a statement of the very obvious, but I think it's important for everybody to recognise, including our NHS partners, delivering services designed for children and young people is fundamental. We should not, and in the vast majority of cases we cannot, just adapt an adult service and treat children and young people as small adults. They aren't. They are different, and we need to recognise that. Secondly, from a public health perspective, we must focus with children and young people on physical activity, diet, nutrition, and emotional and mental well-being. They are the 3 core elements that help to create a healthy child and a healthy adult. And thirdly, and you'll note that this report isn't just the DPH report, it's a joint report between myself and Heather as Director of Children's Services. That was a really conscious decision, and because we want to tackle this together, we need to prioritise education, we need to increase opportunities for our children and young people and their families if we are going to tackle health and social disparities as the language is now. So they're the 3 key points I'd bring to scrutiny's attention. I'll pull out a few points throughout the report and then wrap up. We know in Lincolnshire we have a predominantly older population. That's absolutely true, but more than 1 in 5 people in Lincolnshire are aged 0 to 19. So it's a significant proportion of our population are children and young people, and sometimes we lose sight of that, especially understandably in adult care community well-being. It is, you know, the name's on the tin, but public health is across the entire life courses, from preconception right the way through to in effect a good death. So really important that we focus on children and young people. I won't go through the rest of the introduction, but if we have a look at page 41, which is child health in Lincolnshire, I've brought before the global burden of disease as a methodology. It was the approach we used for the original 2019 Director of Public Health annual report, and we've used the global burden of disease methodology for children and young people. And most specifically, if you go on to page 42, there's a little little graphic there, figure 4. And what it shows, and if everybody remembers, years lived with disability, these are things that affect children and young people but don't kill them, in effect. Years of life lost is what are children and young people dying of. And then we've got overall disability adjusted life years I'll come on to. Important to recognise this. Years of life lost, understandably, for 0 to 5-year-olds is predominantly around prematurity. You know, babies that are born premature have a higher risk of death, and that's the big impact, as are birth defects and brain injury at birth. All understandable and all known, and importantly, the reasons for those are described in the paragraph just below the graphic. If you look at 15 to 19-year-olds, the years of life lost fundamentally shift. Road injuries, road traffic accidents, self-harm and cancers. So whilst we can't and we shouldn't treat children and young people as small adults, we shouldn't also treat children and young people as one homogenous group. They have different issues depending on their stage of childhood or young adulthood, and the report picks that out. It's the same with years lived with disability in terms of depression and anxiety is one of the key issues for teenagers. And actually long-term mental health problems often first manifest themselves in teenage years, and that's something that somebody will deal with throughout their entire life. Whereas for our 0 to 5-year-olds, it's eczema, it's asthma, it's infections. So important. I just wanted to pick that out. Even within children and young people, we need to make that distinction. I'll just a little bit on the maps and the water fluoridation. I'll just make the point that it's great that in my view, half of the population receive fluoridated water. But when you look at the areas that do receive fluoridated water, generally then the more affluent side of the county, and the East Coast, which is our higher deprivation area, not including Lincoln and parts of Gainsborough, obviously, that's the side that doesn't have fluoridated water, and we see that really, really strongly in our decayed, missing and filled teeth data for children and young people. Fluoridated water protects and improves oral health. There is no question. It's not to say we can't do anything. We are doing a lot to help as well, but it's a stark fact there. Moving on to page 47, we've outlined COVID-19 and the impact on children and young people, and there's figure 7 there, shows a timeline of when we saw peaks in infection and drops in infection and how that aligns to school holidays. Again, in terms of preparing the report, it takes a while to prepare the report, so it goes up to the end of August. Clearly, we've seen the Omicron wave before Christmas. All of the COVID in schools was the Delta variant. That's dropped right off. Now we're seeing an increase in our rates in children and young people, and it's Omicron. Fortunately, Omicron does seem to be a very mild disease in children and young people, but we are seeing very significant impact on schools, education, although I checked this morning, I'm covering the duty desk, we haven't got any schools closed at the moment. We have got some classes impacted, but all the schools are doing a fantastic job of dealing with the impact of COVID. I won't go through the detail there because of time, but happy to answer any questions on that. Jump ahead a little bit further to schools and education on page 52. We know that one of the key impacts of COVID-19 directly on children is they catch it and therefore they're off school, but one of the really indirect impacts is with the school closures, the impact on children's social isolation. Really important, children and young people spend time with their family and friends, and that's been very severely impacted. And one of our key areas to look at as we recover from COVID will be around the challenges that children and young people are experiencing in terms of their education, but also in terms of their mental health and well-being, on which, if we jump down to page 59, and I'll wrap up very soon, 8.2, emotional well-being and stress, you can see a significant increase in all 4 areas there in figure 13 between 2019-2020 and 2020-21. We are seeing an impact on behavioural problems, sleep difficulties, complex health issues and speech and language. And I have no doubt in my mind that a significant part of that is the impact of COVID-19 and the isolation that children and young people have felt because of that. In summary, children and young people and their families have endured, as we all have, a real challenge to disruptions in terms of learning and development. We've seen impacts in terms of obesity, in terms of mental ill health, social isolation. We're likely to see an increase in behaviours that are harmful to health. Smoking in pregnancy, for example, which is one of the key drivers of prematurity. So there will be lots of work that we need to pick up as we recover from COVID. But I'm really confident that between the public health team we've got in Lincolnshire and the Education and Children and Young People's Directorate in the Council, that we're up for that challenge and we are ready for it. As we move forwards, our aim is to open up and protect services and make sure children and young people keep that frontline services, to expand what we do for children and young people, including, and we've just approved funding through our executive councillors for family obesity programme in Lincolnshire to pilot that, because we're really going to need that as we come out of COVID. And then in summary, really, those key points are key for me. We've got to ensure our services for children and young people are designed for them and not cut down or adapted versions of adult services. We have to focus on physical activity, diet, nutrition, emotional and mental well-being, and we've got to prioritise education opportunities, and that's how we'll tackle health inequalities. I'll pause there.
Perhaps no one can hear me, actually. So did you just get all of that? Hear it all right? Basically focusing on the physical activities, diet and nutrition, mental and emotional well-being. I.e., if you do eat well, you do physical exercise, your whole mental well-being and everything else tends to sit better all around you. Education somehow seems to not want to really put that on the agenda in the at schools, and especially sort of primary schools and secondary. And I think the challenge should be is actually, because actually if you don't get that right in children's, we end up with a bit of the mess in adults to sort of cover that off. And I think that, you know, as we've got Councillor Rob Kendrick and yourself here, and it's going to children's later on, I believe, on Friday, I think we should set something where our schools look at how they can incorporate this into the curriculum from a Lincolnshire perspective. Not a national, but there must be a slot where they can do something to just promote nutrition, education, activities and health. And I think, why can't we do it? I always get, no, we can't do this, no, we can't do that. But actually we should be able to put something in the curriculum to actually help boost our children. That's just me. Andrew?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to pick up what you said about fluoridated water. Why is all of Lincolnshire not having fluoridated water?
It's just a function of history and where the fluoridated area was covered through previous decisions, well before I was here. There are, in the Health and Social Care White Paper that's going through government at the moment, the proposal is that the decisions about which areas are fluoridated will go back to the Secretary of State. So if that happens, and we understand that will go through Parliament, or is going through Parliament and should be approved, subject to debate, of course, then there may be an opportunity, if Lincolnshire wants to ask that question of the Secretary of State.
Well, I think that's something this committee can ask, because if you're saying that in deprived areas, tooth decay is more of a problem, and often that coincides with no fluoridated water, then that's something that really needs looking at, because it's serious, because we know there's problems with people accessing dentistry, and we're making matters worse by this. So I think this is something we can really push for if the health benefits are there, which by the look of it they are. So thank you.
I don't disagree. I do think that Coca-Cola will outweigh in your sugary drinks any fluoride to the extent, which is why it also sits in high deprivation areas. Sugar rots teeth, end of, and fluoride protection is essential, but it ain't going to do it on its own. And that comes back to nutrition. Tracy, were you highlight? I've got Tracy, then Mark.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got quite a lot that are specific more to the detail of some of the working with children, so I'll keep that for Councillor Kendrick's committee later in the week and try and keep it focused for you, Derek. I still find the report a little bit like everything is wonderful, and not really or all that realistic and honest sometimes. An example being of the tone things are written on page 52, and I am going with the original version that we was given. We've seen this in some areas, for example, with proportion of 5-year-olds achieving a good level of development by the end of the reception increasing over recent years. Yes, we have, but we were lower than the national average. So it just all feels a little bit like the Rosy Garden type of thing, and a little bit, it could be more realistic, I think, possibly. The priorities and recommendations moving forwards on 63, again, they were so broad, they were such high-level comments, but then when we read the appendix with the progress report, there's the detail there of what those recommendations were from obviously public health. So it was those fuller details that I really wanted to see in the other report. Finally, further to that, in regards to the appendix being that update, it told me nothing. This was published January 2020, this original report. So essentially this is an update report from basically 2 years on. And all I really know is that there's been a lot of conversations, and that's possibly all. And I know we've been through COVID, but it's really in initial evidence review, all of these kind of things. There really wasn't enough in there to tell me really truly what actions have been taken from that. So yeah, I'll probably leave it there. Thank you.
I think the words you're looking for, it wants a punchy executive summary.
If that's how you want to summarise what I said, then that's fine. But it needs much, definitely. Yeah. Detail.
Just to clarify, because the Appendix B doesn't refer to the 2021 DPH report, it's the previous ones. So if I can,
doesn't it, which is what
so
I said.
we've done two things, and this is new. As far, well, certainly I know it's new in Lincolnshire. This is my third DPH report. Now, the tone of voice for the DPH report, that completely accept that some people will think it's not rosy enough, other people will think it's too rosy. I accept that, absolutely. The Appendix B refers to recommendations that I made in the 2019 and the 2020 DPH annual report and what we've done with it. You're absolutely right. It hasn't moved on as much as we would have liked to. That is down to COVID. There's no two ways about it. We have been absolutely swamped, as you would expect, and COVID is a real and immediate threat to the people of Lincolnshire, and I make no apologies for focusing my team and my response on that. But that's not to say we haven't done anything, and the appendix outlines some of those areas. I'm sure Councillor Bokit will point out that Adult Care Community Wellbeing Executive DLT has approved funding for example, the Child and Family Weight Programme that we didn't have before, and it's a direct area that we've worked up at the same time as dealing with COVID, ready for when we come out of COVID, and obviously that's part of the COVID funding. But we will do whatever we can within the resources we've got, and those resources are people, and they are indeed the budget. You'll remember from the budget conversation earlier, Pam made the point that central government have given the local government budget settlement. We still don't know what the public health grant is for 2022-23. That's not come out, so we are dealing with a lot of uncertainty at the moment. I'm not trying to hedge my bets here. I completely own the fact that we've focused on COVID and we haven't progressed as much. What I want to do is recover from COVID in the right ways, and the core messages in the DPH report, I believe, are all in the right area. And from scrutiny's perspective, we will, subject to you being comfortable with it, we'll keep coming back and reporting our progress. I can do that, we can do that in as much detail as you require in the future, and get really down into the nuts and bolts that we do through executive DLT. We've got lots of papers, lots of detail. Happy to share those, so you've got a bit more to get your teeth into.
Okay. Thank you. If I could just add to that. So an example of where the detail of what's been achieved, page 66, it tells me that the Least Active Inequalities Project was awarded 160k, and it's to support 40 community and voluntary sector groups. When was that money awarded? So are any of those groups doing anything, and that kind of thing? And actually it could have put a bit more substance to it. And obviously I fully appreciate COVID should and did take priority. But actually by having more detail, that 160 could have been awarded a year ago. Some of those groups could be doing some really good stuff, so there would have been more evidence there. And the other example would be the funding of the 60k in regards to the smoking, which is obviously something we bring up. Each performance report is obviously low in regards to the smoking. So again, maybe just some more detail in some of those may have helped to reassure more was gone on. Thank you.
Yeah, really happy to share all of the documents that sit underneath this for any councillor who's interested, and we've got all of that detail. It's one of those, the document would have been several thousand pages if we'd have put, so, but anybody who's interested in more detail, obviously Councillor Bokett's fully cited as the exec portfolio holder, we can share any of those papers.
Can you do an executive summary? Because I do think it needs to be more concise. I think if I was, say, reading all the counties that submit this to me, I would soon be resigning. You know, it just it's very detailed, but it's very long. And actually, we need, if we're going to influence change, it's got to be more punchy and people just buy into. Would be otherwise we lose what you lose the good work, because there is a lot of good work in here, and it wants to be more key highlighted. I think that's what Tracy's trying to say, and I'm perhaps trying to say as well. So, okay, so Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. I won't say too much about the children part of it, because obviously I'm on children's scrutiny and it's going there on Friday. But certainly a lot of the issues that come out in here, I think the Children's Scrutiny Committee have been aware of for quite a number of years. And also around the fluoridation issue, especially on the East Coast, that came out of a health scrutiny report as well recently, especially I think around Boston area, where I don't think there's any sort of NHS dentists available. It also sort of is an area where there's no flood in the water anyway, so it's a double sort of whammy effect there. I mean, one thing that sort of obviously does concern me is the graph on page 39, which gives the life expectancies of children born, and you can actually see you know, for both males and females, you know, an average possibly like maybe 4 or 5 years difference between children born in the most deprived areas as opposed to the least deprived areas. And I'm sort of then look at the map on page 40, which kind of gives those income deprivation areas. I don't think there's any surprises as to where they are. You know, Lincoln, along the east coast, Gainsborough, and our blob in the southeast around Grantham is actually the Earlsfield Estate, I guess, which is in my division. And this is where I really haven't. It's because 2/3 of my division is probably in the top 20% in terms of, you know, least deprived in the country, whereas the other third is in the 10% most deprived. And I noticed this, and when I see outcomes coming, because at SK level, they've been able to go down to almost to ward level. I'm just wondering, would our data allow us to kind of go down to that level so we could kind of see, because certainly for me, I'm very much aware that there's very, very different life expectations from some of my residents to other my residents. And it does worry and concern me. I'm just wondering what we can try and do to mitigate that. And I know there's a whole lot of stuff, and it's around education, and it's around health issues. But I'm just wondering, you know, to me, it's still, I'm talking about two parts of my division that are a mile apart, and the life chances of one group are so much different to the others. And what can we do to address that? And I know this is probably an impossible question to answer, but we must. If we are making progress, how can we measure that as well? Thank you.
So, in terms of the data, yes, we do go down. As you'll understand, the higher the level, the more data we have, and as you go down to super output area level, which is what the map's based on, we have less data, but the deprivation indices and some of the indicators that feed into that, we do have very detailed information. Happy to pick that up with you outside and go through that. I think the point, my view, having been a Director of Public Health for more than a decade, is Directors of Public Health reports should stimulate a debate, especially with our politicians. Some people will say there's not enough in there. Some people will say it's the wrong area. Some people will say there's too much in there and it needs to be punchier. I'm comfortable with all of that, really am, because at the moment I'm concerned that, quite rightly, we've got a real focus on the NHS, we've got a real focus on social care, we need that, but we're in a global pandemic and nobody is mentioning public health. And when I worked for the Department of Health in Whitehall, there's three parts of the health system. There's the NHS, there's social care, but there's also public health. And if we don't get the public health stuff right, the other two, no matter what we do and how much funding we throw at it, we won't be able to sustain it. We've got to help people live healthier lives, and this is why we focus on children and young people at this point. We've got to help people who do have conditions lead better lives, and that's the only way that the health and social care system, as people are describing it, which is social care and the NHS, are going to be able to cope. So I really enjoy the conversation, and thank you for everybody engaging. But within this environment, I think it's really important we do actively canvass for the fact that the public's health is the primary concern at the moment, and we've got to make sure we focus on what we can do to keep people fit and healthy. And we're doing a huge amount, we've got a huge amount of detail, either geographically or on particular projects, and I'm really, really happy, very happy to put some time in and share those with you.
Thank you. Karen, and then Nicola.
Thanks, Chair. I agree with some of Tracy's points about the detail. I'd like to have more detail, and I agree with you in executive summary reform, if officers could do that for us, because none of us are going to sit, I mean, some of the terminology in that, if it's 1,000 pages, we're not going to understand it. So can we have a summary in a form that we would all understand, you know, that would inform us? And I think I agree with your points about good diet, but it has to be recognised as well, which I'm sure it is within this, that if people are poor, if people are working poor on universal credit, they haven't got the money to have the kind of ideal diets, you know. So that has to be recognised. And mental health is such a huge thing as well. You know, not all families have got the same parenting skills. So some of this stuff in here about education and opportunity and emotional well-being, you know, it's not equal for everybody. And I do think this recognises it. But I just think, for me, I'd have liked to have come to this meeting, and I would have liked to have spent the last half an hour talking about page 63, figure 14, all these priorities, which are really admirable priorities, and I'm sure that you mean them, and I'm sure that you're delivering them and trying to do better, but I would like to know how we're delivering them, what we're doing, and what the aspiration looks like and feels like. So I welcome this report, but like Tracy, I just think it doesn't really tell me what I feel that I need to know. Thank you.
Thank you. Nicola?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Derek. I won't keep you long. I welcome this report, and I'm interested in any detail that you can share to run alongside, because we're not on children's, to run alongside adults. The one thing that I really want to say to you is I want to commend the work of Andy Cook and Derek Samfer in Future for Me. It took me a while to find out about this, but I actually know that they're working and running a programme in my division. So I really welcome this report, and I want to say thank you for that, because that is running in the background. A lot of these services actually run in the background, and if Children's can take anything back when they have their meeting, please, please, please keep the funding for Future for Me. It's a relatively new initiative. It was put in our local magazine last year. There was a big piece about it. And the work that they do is quite extraordinary, and it needs to be promoted. And actually, I think that's probably some of the detail that my colleagues are talking about. Push it forward, but please keep the funding for it, because it does they do excellent work, and they're totally committed. The officers are just wonderful and totally committed. They give up so much time, and I want to thank them for that. Thank you.
Nicola, what was that initiative called?
Future for Me.
Right.
And it's Future number 4 Me.
Yeah, brilliant, thank you. Okay, I've got Wendy, then Mike.
Thank you.
Hi.
I think this report is brilliant. Yeah, it maybe have lack of detail in some respects that you're saying, but it can't have all the detail in it. It will go for pages and pages and pages. But I just think we need to remember that the Children and Young People Service in Lincolnshire is one of the best in the country. And I think we should be very, very proud of that. We've got fantastic officers working very, very hard within that department. And it has been very hard keeping all our young people who haven't been in school for so long this year mentally well. They don't, as Karen's just said, they don't all come from good homes, but they are working. I shouldn't say damn, but I will say damn. They're working damn hard to keep them all there and working with the schools, and it is very hard. But I am very proud of that service. And I think, I don't know if Rob's got any places vacant on Children's and Young People at the moment, but, they always wait, willing to have people sit on there. And you can also go and sit in there as just to watch. If those papers come through that you're interested on it, go and sit in the back and listen, because I was sat on Children's and Young People, and it's a really, really interesting committee.
Thank you. Mike?
Thank you, Chairman. I've only got a couple of points. It's been a very interesting set of statistics placed, a bit mind-boggling at times, trying to assess it all. One thing that caught my eye was children in foster care. Have we managed to sort of catch up with the court cases? Because I'm, conscious of children being stuck in the system.
I think that's one that Heather Sandys, as our Director of Children's Services, would be better placed to answer. I haven't got that specific information. It's one that we can certainly pass through to Children's Scrutiny later, and I'm sure somebody from Children's Services will be at that meeting and will be able to answer.
Thank you. Okay. I've got Rob to come back, but just, is there anything that actually can be done to put in the curriculum to actually support health, mental health, and actual nutrition and diet? Because we do lack that approach.
Obviously, a lot of it is driven by the national curriculum, and I think it's a really good challenge to pick up again on at Children's Scrutiny. There is, as I understand it, some opportunity to tailor local topics to discuss, and we're already doing some of those areas, so we certainly have some of that within our primary and secondary schools. But again, I think trying to talk about the totality is one that we could pick up through the other scrutiny.
As you're both going there on Friday, then it's good. So, and that's why I've left Rob till last, because he can now come in, because he's heard what we've all said, and I'll let you take the floor, Rob.
Thanks, Chairman. I've refrained from saying anything because I thought it'd be a bit greedy to comment in this meeting when I've got it coming up before Children's on Friday. I think with regard, from what I can recall, the question about, was it fostering or children? I think that they're making some headway on that, from what I can recall. So that there is some progress there. As regards what goes on in schools in terms of the curriculum, of course, we have to be aware, and as Derek said, it comes under the national curriculum, that the county council is not responsible for the way schools are run. I remember many years ago, I was on the education committee here, 20 odd years ago, when we had a direct control over schools in the county. There's only a small number of schools that we actually have control over, which are the specialist schools that we are being very successful in developing at the moment. So I don't really think I can add too much because it'll take up time, and we have got the meeting on Friday. And I'd just like to pick up the point you made, Chairman, that yes, all members are most welcome to attend the meeting on Friday. We've got a very full agenda, and a lot of the topics, such as Derek's report, will become before us. And I know we should have a very interesting and lively discussion on Friday, but all members are most welcome to attend, and I'd love to see you there. Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, so I think we've all had a very good debate on this. Just one comment which you said about public health, Derek. I mean, I'm a believer in public health, and I think that everybody here is, and I think that it is the answer to relieving issues in adult social care in the NHS. I think public health now is on the agenda because of COVID has actually elevated it back up high and given it some rankings, and I think it's now public health duty and responsibility to maintain that status now and elevate their own self forward from central or national perspective and bringing it back down. I think in some sense they need to show their teeth more, because at the end of the day they are the preventative service to all the issues that are coming forward in so many other areas. And you know, and I think that's great. You've heard all the comments, so you can absorb that and take it away, and I'll let you come back.
Yeah, it was just to say a couple of thank yous, actually, because whilst it's my statutory responsibility to produce it, clearly the team have done the vast majority of work, particularly Mike Saunders, who's one of our public health registrars, has done a huge amount of work, along with Andy Fox as our children's consultant lead, led on a huge amount of it, along with lots of people in Heather's directorate as well, in children and young people. So just wanted to put on record my thanks to everybody who's put in a huge amount of work here. Lots of work to underpin that. Really happy to share. Just let me know what you'd find useful, and I'll make sure you get all the documents and put some time in to talk through them. But thank you very much.
Brilliant, thank you. Have you had much comments back from the public consultation, out of interest?
Not a huge from the general public, but we've certainly been around various committees and groups within the council. Lots of comments through different mechanisms, being impacted by COVID as well in terms of getting that feedback. So we've got the final version now produced.
Yeah, I think the public, I mean, that's where your exec summary comes in, so they can get a brief and put some thought-provoking ideas in. Will certainly stimulate debate. But anyway, thank you very much for that, and you best go, and hope all is well. And you've certainly got a fantastic 12 months ahead of you to shine. Okay. So we will now go on to item 8, overview of adult frailty and long-term conditions. So for this, I welcome Ross Cordy, Assistant Director of Adult Frailty and Long-Term Conditions, Paul Bassett, Head of Adult Frailty and Long-Term Conditions, Gareth Everton, Head of Integration and Transformation, and Tracy Perrett, Head of Service, Hospitals and Special Projects. So welcome you all.
Good afternoon.
You take it away, Ross.
Thank you for inviting us today to brief you on adult frailty and long-term conditions. The three heads of service, as you say, are here to talk about their own service areas. Paul Bassett, who is the head of the area teams. Gareth Everton, who is head of transformation and leads the occupational therapy team. And Tracy Perrett, who leads the hospital team and special projects. But as an introduction, the service includes all adults over 65 and adults with physical disability. Plus, Tracy leads the practice development team and I line manage the principal social worker. There are approximately 370 staff and we have a budget of 120 million. Picking up the point raised earlier this morning about shared endeavour, we work very closely with commercial team, financial team, the domiciliary care providers and residential care, as well as having a very close collaboration, as you will expect, with health, voluntary sector and district councils. So it will start with Paul, who will give a very brief oversight of his area.
I will indeed. Good afternoon, everybody. Just a very brief run through my service area. There are 15 adult care teams across the county. They're divided into 3 areas: west, south and east. Each area, has a area manager, 2 locality leads and then lead practitioners below that. So you can see on the chart the actual bases for the teams geographically across the area. Can we move on, please? Just some facts about the service. We have approximately 9,715 cases open to the teams. In the year 2020-21, there were over 20,000 requests were made to the teams. So it's obviously a very busy area. In that same year, we completed 4,674 assessments. We also did over 4,000 reviews of customers who have a care service, whether it's care at home or whether they're placed in a residential or nursing home. I've also added in something about the service age profile at the bottom. And as you can see, one of the things about that I think is really interesting is the age profile between 80 and 99, which is 56% of the customers we have in the adult frailty service area. So the age profile is going up higher as years go by. Next page, please. Just something about the performance. The last full year of performance we had obviously was 2020-2021, when we had introduced a new concept of initial conversations, which were in-depth strengths-based conversations that are taken at the front door and with the area teams. Using that new approach, only 42% of that number, which is about 2,491 of those went on to a full assessment that was also carried out by our teams. We also have set a target for assessments being completed within 28 days, and our target was 75%. And as you can see, we completed 75.13 of the 13% of assessments within that 28-day target. And we also, in that same year, were able to review 93% of all the eligible customers who actually had a service open to us. And that is my run through of the area teams. Thank you.
Hi everyone. So as Ross said, Gareth Overton, I look after the occupational therapy service, and I think I've been to the scrutiny committee a couple of times to touch on different things. As a main overview of the OT service, we have about 70 whole-time equivalents working across the service in adult care, and that's a mix of occupational therapists and community care officers. Over the last 2 years, we've undertaken a skill mix analysis, and we've shifted from probably 80% of the service being occupational therapists to something that's approaching a 50-50 mix, which matches some of the referrals that are coming through, which are more referrals for things that CCOs, so community care officers, could undertake under the supervision of an occupational therapist. We now have coterminous geographical boundaries with the districts. That doesn't mean we have a OT team per district, but it's how we kind of set out in terms of the management and helping to form those links with the districts around disabled facilities grants. As a service, we have a high number of referrals, so 6,500 referrals to OT in a year. And in terms of performance, we have adopted a similar approach to Paul's team around trying to deal with as much as we can at that first point of contact. So including the people who have their needs met at the first point of contact and those urgent assessments, we do about 56% of those contacts are resolved within the first 28 days. And then 90% are completed within 100 days. That's not as high as we'd like it to be. We'd like to have everybody seen within 100 days, but service pressures at the moment is such that's where we're at. In terms of benchmarking with authorities across the country, that's a really, really good performance figure that we operate in Lincolnshire. And increasingly, we're working more as an integrated pathway with our NHS colleagues. So understanding actually, in terms of community provision, which organisation would be best placed to look at meeting a person's needs and increasing capacity for things like hospital discharge and pathways. Something exciting. So just the other areas that I deal with. So I've been to Scrutiny Committee before to talk around extra care housing, increasing that supply and the efficiency of extra care across the county, but then also working with our NHS colleagues around continuing healthcare and make sure that that's as efficient a process as it can be, and also the Better Care Fund. So just pass on now. Hopefully the slides work.
Thank you, Gareth. Morning, I'm Tracy Parrott, Head of Hospitals and Special Projects. The first slide you will see is our structure chart for hospitals and special projects. So the biggest team ultimately is the acute hospital teams, which has approximately 90 staff. So we've got an area manager, lead practitioners and hospital leads that support that. We support the main hospitals in Lincolnshire, so Grantham, Pilgrim, and Lincoln County Hospital. We also support Peterborough and we in-reach into NLAG, so North Lincolnshire and Gaul. So we cover really big areas, you can see. Our community hospital services, they support discharges from the community hospitals that are across the county. They also support discharges from transitional care and transfers from our reablement service into our prime providers. Then also we have the brokerage service, so within that is a senior broker, brokerage manager, and roughly 12 brokers that work closely with the prime providers and commercial colleagues with regards to transferring packages of care to the prime provider on hospital discharge as well as in community cases. So then we have the lead professional team and the workforce development team. So within the lead professional team, there's the lead professional within that, and practice leaders that support issues around quality, occupational therapy, continuing healthcare, and extra care housing development. Next slide, please. So in the acute hospitals in 2021, there was 11,077 discharges from the acute sites, and 22% went on to have an assessment or review from the hospital services. And in the 6 months from April to September, 4,446 patients have been discharged, with 20% of them requiring an assessment or review. So I've said that the staff are based at 3 hospitals and neighbouring hospital, and they're unique within adult care as they're the only service that provide a 7-day service. So they support at weekends and bank holidays, but not Christmas Day. That's the only day they don't work. The challenges that we've got at the moment, we've got significant pressure in the system, particularly relating to hospital discharges and the needs of patients on discharge from hospital. It's well documented about the system pressures that we currently have at the moment that are obviously compounded by COVID and Omicron. So it's a very challenging area for us to work in at the moment. Next slide, please. So there's community hospital based across Lincolnshire, and again in 2021, 65% of the 797 people discharged required an assessment or review on discharge. That also includes the inpatient older adult psychiatric inpatient units that are in Lincoln, and the team also support discharges from the 34 healthcare funded transitional care beds that are across the county. They're broken down into 3 teams that cover the east, the south and the west. Next slide, please. We've done a lot of work recently around discharge to assess. So the hospital services and discharge policy and operating model requires a discharge to assess model to be in place to support 3-hour discharges from hospital once a person is deemed to be medically fit to leave hospital. So we currently endorse a discharge to assess the ethos by gaining enough information about a service user to ensure a safe discharge, preferably to their own home, and then when their home and needs assessment is completed. And we're doing a lot of work at the moment with our LCHS colleagues with regard to the Pathway 1 discharge from hospital, which is people being discharged from hospital to their own home with care. So this could be reablement or rehabilitation, or a joint service between LCHS and LCC. Still in its very early days, but is working really well. Next slide, please. So moving on to the lead professional then and the workforce development team. So the lead professional team that ensure that QA activity findings are delivered and understood and acted upon, so what we can learn from the completion of that. And they support the improvement programme, the development programme around strength-based practice, which obviously Paul spoke about briefly. So the workforce quality and development team, they deliver learning and development virtually in needs analysis and succession planning and recruitment, and also investment in social work and OT apprentices. And with regards to this supporting unqualified workers to complete their social work training, we had 10 people qualify in 2019, and we've got another 12 that are due to graduate in 2022, which is a great success for us. We're also very committed as well to the apprenticeship programme, which we support. So we've got 10 apprentice social workers that are qualifying 2023, and a further 3 that qualify in 2024. Some of the studies, unfortunately, was paused due to COVID, but we are now back on track with that. We're also developing as well our OT offer for apprentices. We currently have 3 OT trainees on an apprenticeship programme that graduate in 2022 and 2 that graduate in 2025, and we're continuing to support that. We're also supporting learning disability nursing training, and the aim is to have apprentices starting that this year. So that is it from my service area. Thank you.
Okay, so finally, to summarise, some of these have been mentioned already about some of our key priorities currently. Occupational therapy working across the system, looking about how we can sort of work together more closely. Extra care housing, developing further capacity and making best use of existing schemes. In the area teams and wider as well, building on strength-based practice, proportionate assessments, and developing a bespoke physical disability team. And as Tracy just mentioned, in the hospital teams, we're developing an integrated Pathway 1 discharge from hospital with health colleagues and an integrated discharge hub. So, any questions?
Thank you very much for that. In fact, actually, a lot of what we have discussed in the budget agenda item is actually really highlighted through to what you've just said, with key words around assessments, and how we as a committee would definitely like to see a slicker process, because that is certainly going to be something with the changes on the horizon for reform of adult social care. That is absolutely key. In fact, my own view would be if you could get down to 14 days would be even better, just to set you a challenge. And the workforce priorities, quality, innovation, again, we had a big discussion on that, and that is something that we'd like to see come back to the committee. So Simon will be in touch with you on that one as we organise a slot. I suspect it'll be sort of, what are we looking at? I think about May, June or something, weren't we? April or somewhere around there. Because that's also key to the committee's heart in seeing innovative work, multi-task, and sort of connecting closer to a career path and with the NHS nurses, so that actually we create better salaries within the existing structure. But that's enough from me. So Karen first, and then I've got Rob.
Thanks, Chair. I'd just like to declare the same personal and prejudicial interest that I declared earlier, and I'll take no part as an employee of ULHT, and it talks about hospital discharges as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I would recommend leaving the room for the rest of the discussion if you are declaring a pecuniary interest. Oh, sorry, apologies. Thank you.
Rob?
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted clarification on one point. Under OTs, I'm familiar obviously with OTs, but CCO, the community care officers, are they what we used to call OT assistants in a previous life? And secondly, I was just wondering, under the discharge to access, the last bullet point, urgent work is being undertaken to have joined up therapy, which obviously is very, very welcome. I was just wondering how far down the road you've got on that. Thanks, Chairman.
Glenn might also want to come in on OT's assistance.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the language is fairly interchangeable. We have a generic grade of community care assistant, but there are a number who now work as occupational therapy assistants to the OTs. In terms of how far we've got, there's been quite a bit of progress actually with LCHS, who is the third largest employer of OTs in the county. I think we're the first biggest. ULHT have also reorganised their OT service to now concentrate almost exclusively on discharge. There have been a number of appointments of OTs in the primary care networks, and the PCN for Boston we're working very closely with to try and align the OT service, but we've still got a way to go on this.
Aligning and bridging the gap. It's a good way of progressing this, isn't it? Andrew, and then Colin.
Yeah, could I just ask, please, what an integrated discharge hub looks like under priorities for 21-22? Thank you.
So, what, Tracy, I'll let you describe it because it's your team that have done it.
Okay, so the integrated discharge hub, it's where multidisciplinary team are working together in the same room. So we've got someone from our social work team, so one of our hospital leads who are leading on that. We've got LCHS therapy staff. We've got the reablement service that is funded by Lincolnshire County Council, and we've got the ULHT therapists. What they do is they look at all the people that are ready for discharge from hospital, and they assign them a pathway, whether or not it's returning home, and what level of therapy they need. And so, as I said, someone may be discharged with therapy from LCHS, the Community Health Services, or with reablement service, or a combination of two. And the occupational therapy team in Lincolnshire County Council are working very closely with them as well to support that discharge. So we adopt a pool model so that rather than ULH saying a person's ready for discharge, we actively look for people that are going to need our support on discharge to enable them to get home sooner, which is obviously what people want to do when they're ready to leave hospital.
Thank you. Could I just ask, how often does this hub meet, or are they there all the
Every day.
time? Every day?
Yes.
And everybody turns up every day, do they, remotely?
Okay, it only got together as like a real team base probably a couple of weeks before Christmas. So we had a short blip over Christmas, but certainly since then, everyone has been meeting in the hub on a daily basis at Pilgrim Hospital.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Colin?
Am I on now? Sorry, I think I must have not turned it on. Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for the report. I think my question is to Gareth, and I'm obviously sorry, Gareth, but this is coming from a former maths teacher. There's some stuff I don't understand here. 15 adult care teams in 3 areas, 213 staff. Later on, you say that these teams are coterminous with district boundaries. We're talking about Lincolnshire, I think, here. Does that mean the East team is the East Lindsey district team? And do they have 71 staff, i.e. a third of the 213 staff? And what I'm really interested in is referrals or requests or assessments by postcode, because we've seen from the Derek Ward's report about the deprivation in Mablethorpe, and we know that Mablethorpe has the highest proportion of elderly people in the whole country within its domain. It's a really interesting and quirky anomaly which you highlight on the service age profile. So what we've got is lots of figures here that don't, to me, quite add up in telling the story. For instance, 5932 initial conversations undertaken, 42% of these went on to full assessment. That's 2491. But there were 4674 assessments completed, and then so that it's not actually telling me the story. It's asking me more questions, as I say, and that could be the arithmetic. So, but I'm particularly worried that if we've got a huge elderly population in Mablethorpe, why are they having to travel 15 miles to Louth or to Skegness, or further apart to go to Market Raisin and Boston, if there's a high number of cases there? So it's that information I'm after.
Ros?
Yes. Shall I answer that? Yes, you're absolutely right that there are a high number of older people in it's the whole of the East Coast Strip. It is one of, and so the East is one of our busiest areas. So they don't have to travel. People don't have to travel for their assessments. The workers will either go to meet them, or certainly in the height of COVID, a lot of things was done by telephone or by hybrid model or virtual, so that people we are going to them rather than that people having to come to us. The statistics about the initial assessments and how it converts into initial conversations and converts into assessments, we can get you more detail. This is very sort of high level. So if a person, we feel when they come to us for thinking they need a service, or the district nurse thinks that, we contact the person or their family and have an initial conversation with them about what their needs may be. And often that can be signposted to some other areas, particularly the voluntary sector or our wellbeing service, or other things in the community which the area teams are aware of. If it's felt it needs a full assessment, that's when it's converted to a full assessment.
Thank you, Ros. I wonder if you could answer the question I asked initially, which is the breakdown of staff between the teams. Have we got 71 staff in the East, and is the East Lindsey, or are they not coterminous with district things? That's all. I know those are silly questions, but in the report you say they are.
Can do. My maths of 370 staff might be wrong.
No. Really good question. So in terms of the presentation, what we've tried to do is to separate the different service areas. So from Paul's area, which is the adult frailty locality teams, they are set out slightly differently. So 3 areas. So the east of the county, which broadly is East Lindsey and Boston, as I think in terms of my geography. The occupational therapy service is a much smaller service that is then established in terms of the geographical areas that matches the district. So we have, in effect, 7 teams. They're not set out as 7 teams because in some areas we have 2 district OT teams with 1 manager. So it's slightly different. That 70 members of staff in OT is a county-wide proposition, which is then a proportion of the entire adult frailty workforce. So in terms of Paul's area, he might be able to talk a bit more about the localities within the East area. But as I said, I'm pretty confident it's bits of Market Raise and East Lindsey and Boston.
I think just on this, basically, Colin, quite a while ago, we ended up with a huge number of different areas within the county, and then we actually went to reform it and we got down to 12, and then actually we expanded it back up to about 15 sort of areas. So it has, because it's about how it works best in each area, and then it's sort of connected through into the 3 sort of more hierarchy sites above those areas. Would that be correct? Yeah. So it's actually been, it wasn't just designed, it's actually been a transformation programme to end up to where we are today.
I absolutely appreciate that, and I know we're on a moving forward journey. With regard to Mablethorpe and the high demand there, I'm just trying to work out.
It gets a massive fair share. We look after you incredibly
and that's
well.
what could we see that in the report somehow more clearly? Because it's not coming through to me.
Okay, well, the best just send you that afterwards.
Thank you very much.
That's for Mablethorpe and Sutton and Sandylands and the coast down there.
No, I think particularly it's Mablethorpe and Saltfleet and going up the coast. I think it'll be blurred if you put in Sutton and Sandylands because you've got different demographics in there.
Right, okay. So, ironically, when I did go round the coast, actually some while ago, we ended up at Mablethorpe, and it did have less services, but actually, because actually Mablethorpe actually has a good community and actually does quite a lot of its own volunteering and help and support, which is why actually traditionally it didn't need quite the services in the first place. And having lived behind Mablethorpe, I understand that. They do work actually very well as a community, but they do need support and services.
And I think that might be disguising.
And they do have a lot more to what they had 10 years ago, that is for sure. Nicola, and you'll recap your employment things that you said as well.
Oh, right. Well, thank you very much, Chair. Actually, it's a really simple question, and I hope it's not a reflection of my understanding. But it's on page 29 in priorities for 21-22. Can you just expand on what extra care housing develop further capacity means for me, please, so that I can understand more exactly what it is that you're doing?
I'm actually not sure whether Glenn might want to field this question, but in terms of extra care, we have a programme. I think we last brought a paper to scrutiny, not last time, the time before. We have a number of schemes that are in progress. So we've been through adult care scrutiny and executive and are in a position to be mobilised, but we're always looking at trying to increase the number of extra care schemes.
Okay, thanks for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I noticed we got the requests for assistance is 20,000 plus, and obviously that's going to increase. You hinted there that you do some by phone, some by internet, some in person. Have you got a breakdown of how they are dealt with. And similarly on the profile that you put on ages, you give percentages. Could it be possible in the next report to show the actual numbers of those percentages, which will give us a better idea of the numbers we're trying to deal with?
Thank you. That's very helpful feedback. Certainly the number of people that we either see by that we see face to face or by telephone has varied over the pandemic. At the beginning, the vast majority was done by telephone. Now we expect most of them to be done face to face because we're working with the most complex cases. Going forward, we very much need to get into the more digital agenda, and we're working hard on that about how people can self-serve going forward. We can ask our performance team to look at about that data about what percentage that we are doing face to face at the minute. Most of our initial conversations, which is a big part of our work, is done by telephone and is highly successful.
Could you comment on the percentage figures, please?
I can't give you the percentage figures today, but we can get them from our performance team and send them out.
We needn't send them out, just for future reference.
Okay.
So that we can easily see what numbers we're trying to deal with.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Earlier today, the Chair asked me to prepare a report on our improvement programme for April committee. We'll be able to give you the details there, but also indicate some new changes that we've introduced, such as an initial conversation, so that we don't just talk about an assessment. Not everyone needs a full-blown assessment, which of course takes up a lot of time. A number of people can be responded to entirely appropriately on the phone. And what we're going to try and show you is a more proportionate response to people's needs in the future. We'll be able to cover that in the improvement programme report in April. As far as housing goes, I can remember 8 years ago presenting a report to the Scrutiny Committee and seeking support for members to use what was then a distributed range of capital budgets to create a housing programme. Not just for extra care for older people, but also for working age adults. And it has taken some time to portfolio holders to get to a position where we're actually building things such as DeWint Court, which opens next month. But schemes are in the pipeline for a number of parts of the county where we know there is a need. What we're clear about is that people want something to sit between staying at home and moving into residential care. And the more choices, housing choices we can give people, the fewer people will go into residential settings, which of course is one of our greatest budget pressures. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of little ones. On page 28, the discharge to access area. And again, I completely understand the logic behind it. We don't want to do the bed blocking situation. But the ethos by gaining enough information, I guess I'm looking for assurances that that's not left down to being subjective and that there are enough kind of measures in place to make sure that that really is truly fully information about this person. And then also, once someone is home, with what is expected to be the measures were necessary, how long is it before then that review takes place? Because I do feel when someone's home, the urgency is removed. They're not blocking a bed or anything. So it's just to understand that. And then that we all seem to be fixated on these numbers of 20,000 on the service facts and figures. But I too am fixated on them. So I don't understand how we can go from 20,379 requests to drop then 15,000 and end up only at 5,392 initial conversations. So where have we dropped 15,000? And then from that 5.9, we then are only 2,600 went on to full assessments, but then on the next line it tells me 4,600 had assessments. So none of it makes sense, and where's our missing 15,000 that first had an inquiry? And that's it. Thank you.
Okay, Ros?
Yeah, I'll answer the bit about the missing 15,000, and I'll ask Tracy to answer the discharge to assess. So we get lots and lots and lots of contacts that are put on our system as contacts, which is the 20,000. A lot of these don't need anything doing to them whatsoever. They're often things from police or EMAS, there's duplication or other matters. So that is why it's such a large amount, and then sifts significantly down. But I appreciate what you're saying about if some of the math doesn't add up, and again we will review some of that information so that we can amend it to make it clearer. Shall I pass over to Tracy to talk about how we are assured about that people are not discharged inappropriately?
Okay, the discharge to assess model is based on acquiring the information that we need that is relevant and appropriate to enable a person to be discharged safely. So to do that, we talk to the service user, we will talk to family, we will talk to people that have been involved in the individual's care in hospital, so maybe the therapy staff, the nursing staff, and from that a care plan will be formulated to enable a person to be discharged safely, and then everyone is followed up 24 hours after discharge to see how they're settling back at home, by their contacts by adult care or by the community hospital services, and then at that time arrangements are made to complete a full assessment in the individual's own home at their convenience.
Okay, just one more question then. Following back, Ros, from what you said, how many of those 15,000 are individuals who really felt they needed support? They've been, from an initial conversation, felt that they don't qualify. How many of those have gone away dissatisfied, really still feeling that they should have and still need more help? Thank you.
The vast majority of them will not be from individuals. They'll be from police or from EMAS who are giving us information. So every individual who contacts customer service centre or their family member, the customer service centre have a full conversation with them about what their needs are or what they're wanting. That the customer service centre advisors have been fully trained in strength-based practice to be able to have a full conversation with them. Often those needs can be met by signposting to, for example, the Wellbeing Service or the Carers Service or to community services. Some of those are then move on to the area teams for a further initial conversation, which is fundamentally, again, a proportionate assessment, because the area teams know far more about what's available in the locality. Again, as we talked about Mablethorpe earlier, that there's a lot of community things going on in Mablethorpe, and only the area teams would know that level of information. Often, again, the individual or the family are have enough signposting at that point in time, but out of that where there is a need to do a full assessment, that's where it moves into the full assessment.
Yes, thank you. Come back, if I may, on the workforce, and you commented on the number of successes on people passing various qualifications. Have you been fortunate enough to retain all these people?
Tracy might want to add to this, but I think my comment is that when you support people to go through these apprenticeships, which what we used to call grow your own, these are people who are locality based, that they are very committed to living and working in Lincolnshire, and so it is a highly successful way of supporting people and retaining them. And again, we have the added advantage that they know Lincolnshire, they know us, how the county council works, and they're highly experienced. But Tracy might be able to give you some more actual data.
Yes, all the people we put through the master's training, so the social work degree and the master's, we haven't lost any of those since they qualified. They've continued to work within the county council. We've supported them in their ASYE, which is their assessed year in practice, and they still are part of adult care, which I think is really positive for us. We did lose an apprentice over to children's services, but I think that's because they've done a placement in children's services and liked it. So, but they're still within Lincolnshire County Council, which is good. But no, the retention of people when they've done their training has been excellent.
Okay.
Could you advise us how many more people you've got under training through the apprenticeship schemes? Thank you.
Okay, so at the moment we've got 10 social workers on the social work degree that will, excuse me, they'll graduate this year, so they're due to finish their course at the end of January, and we have identified vacant posts for them as a social work level 1 post. And then the apprenticeship programme, we've got 10 apprentices for social work that will qualify in 2023 and a further 3 in 2024. And with occupational therapists, we've got 3 that are going to graduate a bit later on this year and another 2 in 2025. And the learning disability nursing training, we've got 2 that are hopefully starting this year. But obviously some of it has been delayed because of the pandemic.
Thank you very much for that.
Okay, Nicola.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think Chair actually alluded to me asking this question again because I asked it earlier. Can you tell me, given the fact that the labour market is weak, we've discussed that earlier this morning, where is your labour coming from and how are Lincolnshire retaining their staff once they've got them? Are you keeping them there? Are you retaining them? And what are the incentives to help them to stay about qualifications? Now, you've touched on it there, but people working in the care sector feel undervalued, and I want to be sure that people who are coming to work in Lincolnshire are staying here, we're investing in them, and they want to stay here and do the work, and they want to feel valued. So where is the labour coming from? Where are they coming from in order to work in Lincolnshire? Thank you.
Well, I'll just come in here as well. Basically, this is why we'd like you to come back with a bit more of a report on the sort of workforce in effect around training, development and retention, but sort of also highlighting to the committee sort of work in forms of training for multitasks so that we stop duplications of people going to villages and one person can do multiple jobs and therefore elevate their own salary on the back of that. Seasonal workers, we spoke about seasonal working, about how the hospitality sort of has them sort of working in the summer, and then actually how potentially we can then transfer quite a few of those into helping us with winter pressures when there is no seasonal summer work, and you know, innovation and innovative ideas. And as a sort of a committee, we would sort of like you to sort of come back with a sort of an agenda item on workforce, which Simon will plan in along those line of themes, and sort of, you know, and also the new age of sort of using IT to get rid of social isolation. I've got Wendy that wants to come in. Nicola, do we need a response now, or are you happy to come back? Okay, Wendy.
Over the past few weeks, or months really, just before Christmas, we did a winter summit with our home care providers, which was actually trying to find new ways of making their employees, which obviously work for our residents, important. So we've found ways of including them in pension schemes. We've given them, the home care providers have given them initiatives like helping with childcare, giving them flexible hours. So if they can only work school hours, that's what they've been trying to provide for them, or early evenings. So it's initiative ways of making them working better and making them feel good about themselves. And that also includes training. We're working at the moment having another summit. So we are trying to work with our providers. John's been putting advertisements out, helping the providers advertise, but it is about making them feel worthwhile, that they're doing a worthwhile job. And it is also looking at the hourly rate. Unfortunately, we only have a small amount of money as they do, but we are looking at all that and trying to include them alongside the nurses at the NHS so that they feel valued. But I would greatly appreciate that coming back to the committee as a one-off agenda.
Yeah, brilliant. And of course, we have the Care Awards in March, where we have a formal gathering where we invite the carers, and I think there's about 10, 12 awards, isn't there? And it basically highlights the good work that individuals and the homes do, and we award with the praises and everything else. It's a very nice evening, actually. Okay, so we'll bring all that back in the future. So that takes us. So for that, thank you all very much for joining us and giving your bits. As we know, assessments, integration and workforce really are three key areas, with so much reform scheduled in the next 2 years. They become your priorities, which are also this year's and last year's. So we look forward to reforms coming. Thank you very much for your work.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. So, Simon, on to the work programme then.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I've noted the items that have been added in during the course of the morning, including an item on the improvement programme for the 6th of April meeting.
Assessments, which is assessments.
And the other items too. In terms of the 23rd of February meeting, there are no changes to the list. I'll leave it there, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, brilliant. So we'll let workforce. Leave that one with Glenn to shape up when it's best to come back, but it'll be sometime in the spring. And the other one which we're looking at potentially in May is the financial assessments, which will basically, because obviously on that we have got the issues of the net charge going to gross charge, and we've also got the financial assessments that will be required for the cap and the social reform. So, what's that? No, it's just work programme, and it's just basically saying what's coming forward. So on that note, we've got half an hour's break, and then we're back here for training on the social care reform bill, and I want to learn what the slogan is on it. What is this? But anyway, we will learn more on the social care white paper coming forward.